Chapter 201. The ocean is 1. Tap tap. Cal was quickly walking down the stone steps. His brother, Basin Hennetus, was walking next to him while continuing his report. The whale tribe discovered the enemy ships at the first boundary of the northeastern ocean. The northeast region's sea route's first boundary. This location was the border between the Norland Kingdom and the Forest of Darkness. They are moving pretty quickly and should arrive at the Rhone Kingdom in 2 to 3 days. Basin continued to observe his Hyungnim as he reported out. He hasn't even wiped away the blood. Cal was walking while being covered in blood. Basin clenched his teeth after seeing Cal moving around without rest, even though the battle had just ended, as he quickly continued his report. The Ubar Liege and the representative of the Gilbert Liege are currently requesting reinforcements. Cal listened to Basin's report before starting to speak. Your Highness. Yes, Basin still had the video communication device in his arms. It was directly connected to Crown Prince Albrew Crossman. His father, Count Daruth Hennetus, was currently dealing with the nobles of the northeast region and the rest of the kingdom. Albrew looked toward Cal, whose tired and dirty face expressed that he had been at the center of the battle, with a stiff expression. Cal did not care about any of this, as he only had one thought in his head as he started to speak. I'm hungry. This gluttonous shield wanted even more food after fusing with the vitality of the heart. Cal was quickly taking care of business so that he could go eat something. Please send the 1st Mage Brigade and the 1st Brigade of the Royal Knights to the Ubar shores. Again, what are you thinking about doing with the whale tribe? I am still debating whether to have them fight with us or to still hide their identity. Tap. Cal stopped walking. Your Highness, I know you probably have a lot of things you are curious about, but I will contact you later. All right, I understand. Basin, you go help father. Shouldn't Basin learn a lot of things now if he was to become the future lord of the territory? Cal looked toward Basin, who was not moving, with an odd expression. Basin looked at where they had arrived as he started to speak. Hyungnim, why are you trying to do all of the difficult and strenuous tasks? This area had been closed off for tens of years. It was the underground prison. He could see a faint light inside. Basin found it hard to understand this Hyungnim of his that was trying to send him away. Why? Why does he always try to do all of the hard things on his own? He found it hard to understand. However, Cal was having the opposite thought and found it difficult to understand Basin's point of view. Difficult and strenuous tasks. I didn't want to deal with the other territories or the temples, so I came here to do the easy task. Cal just said whatever came to mind as he could not understand Basin's point of view. It is not hard. This type of task is more suited for me. You should head back up. Basin opened and closed his mouth a few times without being able to say anything. What kind of person is suited for torture? Cal was currently going to interrogate and torture someone. Basin was thinking that this warm-hearted Hyungnim of his, the man who worked so hard to save the citizens of the territory, could not like nor be suited for such a task. I will do so if that is your will. Basin turned around. A thought was going through his mind. He understood why his Hyungnim would choose to personally handle this kind of task when both he and his father were available. At least he thought he understood. I am still young. Basin Hennetus, the 17-year-old young man. He realized that he still had a long way to go in order to be like the people surrounding his brother. He needed to grow in order to not become baggage. Basin did not look back even once as he headed up and out of the underground prison. Cal started to speak once Basin was no longer visible. Apple pie. A small paw appeared in the air along with a piece of apple pie. Cal started to frown once he received the apple pie. What the? Why is the apple pie so moist? The apple pie felt as if it had been wetted by water. Cal heard mumbling as he started to frown. I did not cry. Heh. Cal let out a sigh at Rayon's response. I will go get you a new one if you do not like it. Human, don't eat it if you don't want to. An apple pie from a not great and mighty dragon like me is not great. Egu, Cal let out a sigh and took a bite of the apple pie. He couldn't just throw away something given by a child. Furthermore, he was too hungry. His stomach felt completely empty. I could even pick up the dirt and eat it at this point. He really meant it. The hunger became worse after the vitality of the heart and the indestructible shield fused together. The two ancient powers didn't necessarily fuse together. They were still separate powers. However, there was now a connection between the two powers. If the indestructible shield was a person, the vitality of the heart had become that person's heart. Munch, munch. Cal ate the apple pie as he opened the door to the underground prison. Screech, he then stopped eating. He heard the sound of a whip. Flee. Ah. Blood was being splattered onto the walls. A lot of blood must have been on the walls already, as you could not even tell that the new blood had landed on it. Ah, young Master Nim, you're here. Ron gently greeted Cal, however. He had a cold gaze as he looked at Cal from head to toe. Why is this old man's gaze so cold? Cal felt small as Ron looked at him that way. He then became anxious. Ron took out a dagger and then threw it. Stab. The dagger stabbed the man being tortured in the shoulder as blood splattered once again. Cal avoided Ron's gaze and looked toward Beecrox. The chef and torture expert Beecrox was wearing 4 pairs of white gloves as he flicked the whip with a stoic expression. The father-son duo, who did not have a drop of blood on them, introduced Cal to someone. We are chatting with him as you instructed. Ugh, gasp. The sound of someone gasping for air could be heard as Cal saw that the man's white hair had turned dark red from dry blood, the guardian knight Clope Seca. He had fallen into Cal's hands. The father-son duo had immediately captured him and moved him to the underground prison when Choi Han had defeated him on the battlefield. Ron continued to speak with a benign smile. We kept him alive. Yes, as long as he is alive. Cal heard Rayon's voice in his head. Good job. Ron and Beecrox really are smart. Cal could not respond. Clope Seca's legs were finely minced. Yes, they were minced like meat. He also had no arms. He was just alive. This was a scary sight that looked to come straight out of a nightmare. It was probably better to be dead. Ron casually continued after approaching Cal. Young Master Nim, seeing as how he does not even know how to control the wyverns, I didn't think we had much use for him, so I just left him alive enough to chat with. Did I do well? Cal answered honestly. Good job. Ron had done a good job. He's still conscious, right? Yes, sir. Cal nodded his head at Beecrox's stoic answer and approached Clope Seca. Huff, huff. Clope Seca was having trouble breathing. He felt pain throughout his body every time he took a breath. However, the pain was slowly disappearing as well. That was why a different fear was filling his mind. I'm going to die. I might actually die like this. It did not matter to him anymore why this rural territory had a torture expert and an assassin. All that he could think about was getting away from this scary place. It was at that moment. Guardian Knight Nim. It was a very gentle voice. However, Clope did not dare to raise his head, this bastard, the owner of this gentle voice. This bastard was the true head of this territory, Cal Henetus, the man who had used the shield. He would have never expected a young master whom he considered to be good and just to do such a thing. Clope could not say anything. At that moment, his body that had lost all sensations suddenly felt a different type of sensation. His cheeks started to shake, fear and suppression. It was as if someone was suppressing him. He had not felt this from anyone other than that person. He heard the gentle voice once more. Please lift your head. Clope slowly raised his shaking head. He was dominated by Cal after being hit by the dominating aura. However, he saw a smiling Cal Henetus when he raised his head. It's been a while, hasn't it? Is he talking about meeting at the castle wall earlier? Clope Seca nodded his head subconsciously in fear. However, he had to stop nodding his head. His entire body froze as if time had stopped. The red hair of the man in front of him was slowly turning white. Then his reddish-brown eyes turned blue. Clope's mouth opened and closed multiple times without being able to say anything. It was a familiar face. It was a face that was distinct in his mind. That face and Cal's current face overlapped perfectly. The priest. The magical priest he had met in January. The smile on the priest's face disappeared. Clope could not breathe again as the pressure suppressed him once more. The white-haired priest slowly started to ask, Has it been fun running around on top of my palm? Did you have fun thinking you were going to be a legend? That was what Clope heard in his head. He then thought about the past month. He had met a magical priest at the beginning of the year, and then a pillar of fire shot up in the god's tears lake. He had believed he would be the main character of the legend based on the priest's words, but all of those things were lies. The man who had wanted to become a legend slowly started to break down. I will give you another prophecy right now. Cal had a lot of things to hear from Clope Seca. That was why he was being honest with Clope. I will tell you what will happen to you. Clope could not stop his chin from shaking as he looked up at Cal. He had believed the priest was there to present the will of a god. That priest, Cal, now acted as the god for Clope's life as he started to speak. I will tell you what will happen to you. Everything is on the top of my palm. Clope could feel it in his bones. This person in front of him held his life in his hands. So, tell me everything. That was what Cal said as he looked toward the shaking Clope. Of course, there was something that Cal had left out. Clope had two options in front of him. One was to die peacefully. The other was to die after being tortured some more. Those were his only options. Being able to live was not one of them. Cal sat down on the chair in front of Clope and looked down at him. Clope continued to shake and avoided Cal's gaze, however. He could not lower his head. All he could do was look under Cal's eyes around the chin area as he continued to shake. Cal remembered what Choi Han had said before he went off to be treated. The Seca household is a white snake household. Cal opened his mouth to speak. White snake. Clope was the white snake. This white snake that was covered in blood gasped at Cal's words. What is the legend that you were trying to fabricate this time? Clope realized something. There really is nothing this person, this esteemed sir, did not know. He knew everything, including the fabricated legend. Fear started to fill his body. He then slowly started to speak. The man who had been silent throughout Beecrox and Ron's torturing finally started to speak. Cal then heard everything. You are smiling. Cal touched the corners of his lips after hearing the comment Alberu made as soon as the call connected. He could feel the smile on his face. I guess it makes sense, since I learned about a lot of things. Cal had learned a lot of information from Clope. Some of that information included why a strong bastard like the Helmeted Knight had not revealed himself until now on the Western continent, as well as why Arm had gone to the Western continent. He also realized the problem that was assigned to him. There was only one conclusion. I changed the story. All of this had happened because the war and Arm had been revealed too early. However, it was not time to think about that problem right now. There was one more thing. I feel like I'm a pretty lucky person. Cal thought about the crown in his bag as he leaned on the couch and casually responded back to Alberu. I seem to have gone crazy from fatigue. He thought that the crown prince would scoff at him. However, Alberu started to frown while remaining silent, making Cal think this was an odd situation and continuing to speak. I plan to go to the Ubar territory tonight. With that body, what's wrong with my body? He felt full and fine after eating a couple of apple pies. The regeneration abilities of the vitality of the heart had gotten even stronger. He may be covered in blood right now, but his skin had become smoother, and he felt as if he would be fine even if he did not sleep for about 3 days. Cal responded to the Crown Prince without a moment of hesitation. Yes, sir, I will be going with this body. Ha! He could hear the Crown Prince sighing. Cal felt upset for some reason. However, he needed to move quickly. The Mark Rayon left continued to send signals to them. The Helmeted Knight was coming back with the ships. They needed to kill that bastard this time. That was the reason he was taking Ron and Beecrox with him. He had no plans on letting the knight die a peaceful death. He also left a message with the ancient dragon Iruhaben through the video communication device. Iruhaben would probably call him back soon. Cal had quite a lot of things to do, so he was in a rush. That was why he got right down to business. Your Highness. What is it? The whale tribe. Alberu was still debating whether to have the whales fight with them or to hide their existence. What about the whales? Let's hit the Perun Kingdom. Silence filled the room. Alberu started to laugh after a while. Ha, 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 he laughed for a long time. Alberu then looked at Cal Henetus's mess of a face. He could also see Cal's sharp gaze. This punk really is amazing. The Crown Prince started to smile. I like it. I like it very much. He then said one last thing before hanging out. Take care of your body, click. He hung up without even waiting to hear Cal's response. Cal just called for Ron with an expression that seemed to be saying this was normal behavior for Alberu. Ron. Yes, sir. He pointed to the corner of the room as he gave Ron the order. Go bring Mueller. On and Hong as well. You want the cats to come up from the training ground as well? Yes. Cal had thought that this battle would not be difficult, and as such had On and Hong continue training instead of taking part in the battle. There was something for the two of them to do now, however. Ron soon brought the three over to Cal. The mixed-blood dwarf rat Mueller was shaking while keeping a distance from the cats, while On and Hong immediately rushed toward Cal. However, they flinched at his blood-soaked appearance and just roamed around him. Cal asked the two of them a question. Are you ready? Ready. We're good to go. Cal got up after hearing those responses. He was heading toward the U-Bar territory. The ocean was somewhere that Cal had nothing to protect. On and Hong, the ocean would soon be covered in a poisonous fog. The name of this operation was Ghost. They will all die without realizing what happened. That was most suited for the quiet night ocean. Chapter 202. The ocean is 2. The U-Bar territory that is located on the Rhone Kingdom's northeastern shoreline. The liege of the U-Bar territory, Poplina U-Bar, looked around while taking in the cold ocean breeze. Young Lady Amaru, her future successor, was cautiously watching her. Splash, splash. This was the spot where they could best hear the waves that were crashing against the naval base. This usually dark and quiet port was still dark, but not quiet today. Pat, the teleportation magic circle flashed once more. Poplina reached her hand out in order to ask for a handshake. Welcome, Viscount. Nice to see you again, U-Bar Liege. The person awkwardly shaking the U-Bar Liege's hand was a Viscount, who used to be a part of the Southeast Region's Marquis Ainz faction. He was currently trying to blend in with the rest of the group while wearing his armor. He left Poplina's side and moved to where the other nobles were standing. None of them had bright expressions on their faces. The Viscount didn't even greet the other nobles from the Southeast faction as he looked around the naval base. He then put his hand over his shaking heart. A person's voice was still echoing in his mind. The shield did not break. He recalled that intense battle. The Viscount, who had watched that battle from his castle office, could not help but run over here right away. That person would come here. The Northeast Region's military commander, Cal Henetus. He would be coming here tonight. The Viscount recalled what Cal Henetus had said as he walked away from the oval table the last time they had met. If it is the nobles' way to attach themselves to the strong, then you will soon have to decide who you need to attach yourselves to in order to survive. He needed to stick to Cal if he wanted to survive. This was his only chance to do that. His, as well as the other nobles' eyes were all continuously looking around. They could not hide their shock. They could barely make things out in the darkness. However, the numerous ships and the soldiers standing in perfect formation let them know just how long they had been training for this battle. We've been left behind. The nobles realized that they had been left behind and that their strengths were puny in comparison. They also realized that they were not even in that person's eyes. That was why they were here, waiting for the strong to arrive. The video communication device in young Lady Amaru's arms flashed at that moment. She turned toward her mother and started to speak. He's coming. The nobles all became nervous at her statement. Is it Cal? The teleportation magic circle started to activate. Ooh-wong, it seemed to be larger than any other time it had been activated. This meant that it was transporting a large number of people. The nobles standing around could not help but gulp. Pat. The teleportation magic circle flashed before silhouettes of people appeared on top of it. The U-Bar Liege started to speak once they completed their transportation. Welcome, Knight Captain Nim and Mage Captain Nim. The 1st Brigade of the Royal Knights could be identified by the royal crest on their armors. And then, there was the other group that was being revealed to the world for the first time. The nobles had heard what the U-Bar Liege had said. Mage Captain. They could see tens of people wearing robes that were covering their faces. Mage Brigade 1 was composed of the best mages that Crown Prince Alberu Crossman had gathered. The Mage Brigade was revealed for the first time since its creation. The mage captain shook the Ubar Liege's hand. "Nice to meet you." The face that was covered by the hood was that of Alberu's aunt, the dark elf Tasha in her human form. She was an elementalist and not a mage, however. She was still leading the Mage Brigade. However, the Mage Brigade's true leader was Rosalind. Tasha was taking the captain's spot instead of Rosalind because Rosalind was currently at the Breck Kingdom. "Will he come soon?" The Ubar Liege nodded her head at Tasha's question. Tasha then silently led the Mage Brigade to a side of the room. The Royal Knights stood next to them. The first brigade of the Royal Knights was not very talkative. Tasha understood why they were almost speechless right now. The Mage Brigade naturally had a video communication device on them. She had shown the mages and the knights the battle at the Henetus territory as she led them here. They had seen that electrifying battle. It was a battle of existences that even Tasha had never expected to see. That battle between the Dragon Slayer and Cal's group had shaken her up. Tasha was so worried about the necromancer Mary and the rest of Cal's group that she almost went crazy. Although it seems that the knights went crazy for a different reason. Tasha peeked toward the knight captain. He had a face that looked like he was a stubborn man with a strong sense of responsibility. The knight captain, who seemed to be in his 40s, was quietly observing the teleportation magic circle. The rest of the knights were doing the same thing. They had seen a sword master. It had been a long time since the Roan Kingdom last had a sword master. However, a new sword master had suddenly appeared. He had also been riding on a bone dragon. Tasha understood there, no actually, she understood the thoughts going through the minds of every person who had watched the battle. That was why she quietly waited as well. Splash, splash. The teleportation magic circle started to vibrate once more through the noise of the splashing of the waves. Ooh, they had been waiting for this. The nobles turned their gazes that had been on the Royal Knights and the Mage Brigade back toward the teleportation magic circle. The white light flashed as people started to appear one by one. Ah, someone let out a gasp. The first person who became visible had one of his shoulders bandaged up. Someone from the crowd let out his identity. Sword Master. They did not even know his name. They saw someone wearing a black robe next to her. People could guess who she was even though she had been invisible throughout the entirety of the last battle. That person must be the necromancer. They were followed by Ron, who was wearing an assassin's outfit including a mask, Beecrox in a swordsman outfit with a greatsword, and the mixed-blood dwarf Rat Mueller, who was surrounded by 2 kittens. Cal's group was appearing one by one, and the last to appear was Cal Henetus. He appeared on top of the magic circle, and the crowd gulped. One of the nobles could not help but mumble. Blood, the blood. Cal still looked the same as he did at the end of the battle. Cal was standing there in the same bloodied outfit that he was wearing during the battle earlier in the day. His gaze was looking around at the group. However, the nobles did not think that Cal looked dirty or shabby. In fact, they felt the pressure of someone who had survived on the battlefield. Furthermore, it helped them realize that the war was just beginning. It was at that moment. The Ubar Liege started to speak. Salute. The nobles flinched at her statement. However, loud voices started to shout from behind them. The soldiers who had been standing at attention this whole time shouted in unison. Chung. To the entire navy saluted Cal so loudly that the entire shore seemed to shake. Their salute was toward the Northeast region's military commander, Cal Henetus. Their voices shocked the nobles until they heard a different noise. Click, click. Sword that shined under the moonlight started to be drawn one by one. The knight captain took out his sword and lifted it up. The rest of the knights soon followed his actions. They had moved their swords instead of speaking. Clang, the swords pierced the air in a salute. This was the knight's salute. This was the way they greeted the people they needed to obey. The mages then started to create small orbs of light and sent them above the nobles and the soldiers. The dark shores slowly started to light up. Cal silently watched all of this before slowly starting to speak. Now I can see. He was not using the respectful way of speaking right now. However, nobody thought that this was awkward. It was so natural that nobody even realized it. No, they did not have the time to realize it. There's a lot of people. Cal said just one thing while looking at the nobles. The nobles could clearly see the way Cal was looking at them. They could tell that Cal was looking down on them. However, the nobles still did not dare to speak. The strength of Cal's forces was at the level of the crown. In some aspects, it was even stronger than the crown. Furthermore, he was currently a hero. The entire Rhone kingdom was still buzzing about the battle from earlier in the day. Cal's name was on everyone's lips. But most importantly, Cal was giving off a different vibe. They could feel the aura of a ruler that was worlds apart from what they had felt in the banquet hall. These nobles, who were the most sensitive to who was strong, bowed their heads. Funny punks. Cal did not pay much attention to the people trying to suck up to him in order to survive as he turned in order to look at the soldiers. Their faces showed nervousness and concern, but also hope. Cal started to speak. His low voice reached the hundreds of people standing there. Prepare to leave. That was the beginning. The atmosphere around the shore quickly changed. They had been expecting this order. Nervousness was on the minds of everyone here. However, Cal was not done speaking. Tomorrow night. He spoke in a calm voice without any hesitation. We will obliterate the enemy. Obliterate. Kill them all. That word was etched deep into the minds of the soldiers. Someone shouted in a loud voice at that moment. We will follow your order. It was the knight captain of the Royal Knights. He raised his sword and placed it over his chest as he shouted. His voice seemed to be full of confidence in his ability to carry out the order. The Ubar liege motioned as if to respond to his shout, and the soldiers started to shout as well. We will follow your order. The people on the shore started to quickly move during this dark night. There was a sense of thrill and excitement along with the nervousness. Obliterate. They would carry out that order. Cal's order was echoing in all of their minds. Cal was standing on the deck of a ship in a clean outfit the next night as he listened to Ron's report. His hair was fluttering in the ocean breeze. The ships are mainly mid-sized ships, with a total over 300 ships. The information sent by the whales were finally reaching Cal's ears. He paid attention to each piece of information. He would not let his guard down anymore. This battle would be the expression of his will not to do that. Originally, there were some ships in shapes that have never been seen before. We suspect that those ships were what they used in order to break through the ice up north. They are probably something made by the dwarves. Cal lowered his head. Explain. Mueller seemed so shocked to the point that he would faint before he quickly starting to speak. I believe it is a ship made by the flame dwarves. I've heard that they are weak when it comes to magic devices, but quite famous for their mechanical devices. Weak. To be honest with you, it is closer to that they cannot make them at all. A dwarf that could not make magic devices was like an elf that could not handle an elemental. That was why Mueller did not look very good as he explained about the flame dwarf tribe. He felt a bit sorry for them. However, Cal was thinking that their sorrows were none of his business. I can blast them away with magic. If they are terrible with magic, the magic brigade could kill them. However, he thought about the magic scrolls that the helmeted knight and the bears had in their possession during the battle. The fact that they had such magic scrolls meant that the enemy's level of magic was strong as well. The reason that the helmeted knight was teleported to the ship was almost certainly because mages and healers were on board. In that case, he needed to get rid of them too. Beep, beep, Commander Nim. Young Lady Amaru ran over to Cal while wearing leather armor. A video communication device was shining red in her arms. Cal saw a small boat approaching their ship at that moment. He heard the following noises coming from the boat. Meow. Meow. Cal started to smile at the sounds that he had been waiting for. On and Hong were in Choi Han and Beacrox's arms. The small boat that they were on was heading toward Cal's ship. The eerie noise of the wind brushed by Cal's ear. However, he managed to hear young Lady Amaru's report as well. The enemy ships have passed the 3rd boundary. This was the 3rd of 4 total boundaries. The enemy would soon approach the 4th boundary. Cal looked down from the deck of this ship that was currently located at the 4th boundary. All done. the masterpiece made by the children averaging 9 years old. Shhhhhhh, the sound of leaves rustling in the air, something that was difficult to hear out in the ocean, could be heard. That noise started to surround the ocean around the fourth boundary. Fog. Fog was covering the ocean. The only boundary with an actual mark could no longer be seen because of the fog. This fourth boundary would be an invisible boundary of death for the enemy. Cal gave the order, "Get rid of all noise." The name of this operation was Ghost. The entire fleet of the Roan Kingdom's navy started to go quiet, starting from Cal's ship. Silence filled the ocean. The ghosts were waiting for the arrival of their enemies. 1. Not sure why they are not referencing a title for her. Maybe she doesn't have one, too. The Korean military says Chung Sung, which means loyalty when they salute. It is a sign of respect. If you've watched K-dramas like Descendants of the Sun, you may have heard it. I'm thinking Chung may be used when it's a large group and they say Sung, when the person the group is saluting salutes back. Don't take my word on this part, though. Chapter 203. The ocean is 3. It looked like the migration of seasonal birds. The approximately 300 ships cutting through the water were moving in a triangle formation. This fleet of ships had started from the indomitable Alliance's Norland naval base. At the center of the formation was the largest of the icebreaker ships that broke through the frozen northern shores. The helmeted knight was currently being healed at the highest cabin on this ship. How pitiful. The dragon slayer started to frown after hearing the healer's comment. However, he could not speak properly right now. The healer sighed before casting a healing spell onto the dragon catcher's heart. Approximately 2/3 of the heart was destroyed. It would take at least a week to restore this damage. Even after that, it would take at least another month for it to heal back to normal. He also came back without an arm. However, the arm should be easy to restore once they informed the organization. The healer scoffed at the dragon slayer and started to speak in a mocking tone. "Looks like you need to be locked up for a while like old man Tamer." "Shut, ugh!" The dragon catcher could not finish speaking. The magic claw that had clenched his heart at the end of the fight was still causing him a lot of pain. A third person who had been watching the helmeted knight and the healer started to speak. The aged mage's voice was cold. "A sword master just below your level, a necromancer, and someone with an ancient power that can block your sword once all exist in that small territory." "Yes." The helmeted knight's attitude was slightly rude, however. The mage did not care as he continued on. "And there is also a mage who is stronger than you." The helmeted knight flinched internally, but did not let it show on his face. "Yes, it is a mage who was able to imitate my sword of disasters and almost destroy my heart." The helmeted knight had seen a dragon's eyes. "However, he did not mention that. I need to take that for myself. These bastards would take the dragon for themselves if he mentioned it. They'll give him the dragon's snood while taking the rest of the dragon." 2. That was the original deal that fell through when the dragon they had in mind suddenly disappeared. The helmeted knight recalled the pair of dragon eyes that had looked at him. It wasn't an ancient dragon based on the size of the eyes. He was certain that it was a young dragon that had not even had its first growth phase yet. The helmeted knight suppressed his heart that was beating wildly. It was not that the dragon didn't use dragon's breath. It was that it could not use it. That fact brought the helmeted knight some bliss. If he worked this properly, he might get the opportunity to get stronger without the head of this organization, that crazy bastard, knowing about it. "I will eat the second dragon." The helmeted knight was thinking about this beautiful future. He heard the mage's voice once again as he did that. "The sword master that is not at your level. How is his plate?" Plate referred to a body that could hold ancient powers. Ancient powers were known to be weak, however. That was just something that the stupid people who did not know anything had determined. Ancient powers that were created in nature and have natural affinities that came directly from nature and not from humans. How could these powers be weak? They just thought that they were weak because they did not know how to use them. Of course, the human-generated ancient powers were weaker than the ones with natural affinities. The helmeted knight flinched at the mage's question, but answered with a calm expression. "Not much. He didn't have a big plate." The helmeted knight lied without any issues. The sword master with the black aura actually had a plate that was about the same as his own. That was why he could not tell them the truth. If he did, they wouldn't have a reason to heal him. They would just go find another person with a similar plate instead. The old mage started to frown as if he was contemplating things. We will need to head for the Hennetus territory as soon as we conquer the Rhone Kingdom's shores. We need to get rid of them. The helmeted knight clenched his hurting body as he urgently added on. That damn noble. I will kill that red-haired bastard. He's the one with the dragon's protection. I can take the dragon if I get rid of him. It was possible to take that noble down with just one arm. He was someone who only had a shield and human regeneration powers. The mage answered back to the dragon catcher, who seemed to be getting angry at the person who had multiple ancient powers, just like he did. Whatever. It shouldn't be difficult if you, the healer, and I go together. The dragon catcher did not disagree. The old mage and the healer were both useful, even though they were both also weaker than him. The mage looked at the healer and dragon catcher for a moment before opening the cabin door. There was someone bowing to greet him outside. Sir, we are almost at the Rhone Kingdom's northeastern shoreline. It was the magic spearman, the same enemy that Cal's group had faced the most in the past. This was also the person who had used magic and spear arts together in order to betray the sword master and fake holy maiden, Hannah. He bowed while looking at the three people inside the cabin. They all held a rank higher than him. These three were pretty much part of the organization's core. That was easily visible through the red star on the mage's robe. Unlike the white star and 5 red stars on the magic spearman's outfit, they all only had a single red star on their outfits. Only 5 people had these outfits with just a red star. These were the 5 that served the white star. We'll head out soon. I'll be heading to the front ship. Yes, sir, I will escort you there. The mage bowed his head at the old mage as the healer started to grumble. Didn't you say that the Rhone Kingdom's naval base was shabby? Why do we need so many ships when they barely have any? We're trying to conquer the Whipper Kingdom's shores at the same time. Plus, it's good that we did since the Rhone Kingdom was stronger than we expected. The old man casually brushed it off as he headed toward the door. More importantly, shouldn't we get them back since they landed the first hit? The healer smiled in a twisted manner as he nodded his head. I suppose so. The Rhone Kingdom is probably only expecting the Indomitable Alliance. They probably have no idea that we are on the ship. This should be fun. They were all used to the healer licking his lips as if this was extremely exciting. None of them argued against the young child's words. However, there was actually someone else who was having the most fun right now. Deep in the waters underneath the 300 ships, a humpback whale was swimming very deep in the ocean. This humpback whale with an X-shaped scar on her back, Witira, the future whale queen, looked toward the south. They are almost at the 4th boundary. The humpback whale started to smile. She recalled what Cal had said last night. Witira, please take the whales and destroy the Perron Kingdom shores. He then continued to speak. In return, we will obliterate the enemy fleet. This is going to be fun. Witira became certain after seeing Cal's confident expression. He was someone who kept his word. That was why she didn't need to see it with her own eyes to know what was going to happen. Her large tail moved in order to change her direction, toward the north. The humpback whale turned away from the fleet of ships and started swimming in the opposite direction. Many whales and whales started to move toward the north along with her. These forgotten creatures quietly moved up to the north. At that same time, a very quiet noise reached Cal's ear. Click. It was a signal sent by a mage. It was the signal that the enemy had arrived. Cal started to smile. The fog covered the enemy's sight, but it had done the same for their allies. Cal had no reason to hide any of his cards anymore. The rest of the Rhone Kingdom's people other than Cal's group all thought that Cal only had the shield. Cal did not try very hard to correct that mistake. It was easier that way. You did not need to show your strength in order to live a peaceful life. However, there was no need to hide it within the fog. Wind started to blow over the ocean that was quiet once more. The fog started to spread farther as Cal started to move. The fog stealthily spread like a cat's footsteps. Huh? Fog? The old mage who had left the ship with the cabin and moved onto the deck of the ship at the front of the fleet started to frown. The white fog was almost covering the entire ocean. Did the Roan Kingdom's shores usually get foggy? The magic spearman next to the old man started to get an ominous feeling. The mage started to speak at that moment. "It is not magic." "Ah, is that so, sir?" "Yes, this fog was not made with magic. Since the fog was not magic, it must be a natural occurrence." What else other than magic could create such a fog? The magic spearman was relieved and gave the order as the ship started to enter the fog. "The waters are calm, but we are entering a foggy region, so raise the warning level to 1 to be cautious." "Yes, sir." A Norland soldier bowed and followed the magic spearman's command. This ship mainly had arms people, while the 2 ships behind this one had people from the Indomitable Alliance. The Norland soldier picked up a horn flute and took a breath in order to announce the magic spearman's orders to the rest of the fleet. Yes, he took a breath. He saw the fog in front of his face as he took this breath. "I thought it was farther away, but are we already in the foggy region?" That was his thought as he put his mouth on the horn flute. All he needed to do now was to blow. It was at that moment. The wind made the fog start to spread. The mage started to speak loudly in order to be heard over the wind. "This wind is made by magic." They heard a different noise on the deck at the same time. Clang, the horn flute fell. The magic spearman urgently turned his head. Arg, ugh, the soldier who had taken the breath was bleeding from his mouth. The magic spearman, who was still breathing in the fog as he watched this, suddenly flinched as his body started to shake. Poison. Enemies. He quickly covered his mouth with his hand. However, the wind was already roaring around them. The wind rushed the fog toward them. Their surroundings were covered by the white fog in an instant. The magic spearman subconsciously opened his eyes wide as he started to shout. "What the?" Red fog. The fog was starting to turn red. It gave off an ominous feeling. This fog that was the color of blood slowly covered the ocean. Rayon, On, and Hong. The red fog that was the combination of the 3 of them working together started to seep into everywhere that air was present. Kek. What kind of fog, ugh? Unfortunately, the fog hit the weakest people first. The soldiers of Norland and the Perun Kingdom all had their hands at their necks. All they could see out of their eyes was the color red. The magic spearman quickly created a magic shield and picked up the horn flute. Boo-woo-woo-woo-woo-boo-woo-woo-woo-woo, war. The noise that signaled for war instead of a warning echoed across the ocean. That noise reached the middle of the fleet. What the hell? The healer, the young child who was at the central ship, jumped up and looked out the window. He could see the red fog, as well as foot soldiers falling down while coughing blood. Poison? The child's eyes changed. This was the healer's forte. "I'm heading out for a bit." The healer reached for the cabin door, but the dragon catcher grabbed the child's wrist. "Stay here." "What?" "Here, ugh, stay here because I'm not healed yet." The healer was in disbelief. The emergency healing was completed, and all he needed to do now was rest. How could someone be so selfish? The people coughing up blood outside and dying were all a part of the same organization. However, the dragon catcher's condition was a bit different. "I have a bad feeling about this." The dragon slayer had an ominous feeling. He had rested a bit, but his body was still not back to normal. It was still injured, and he still did not have his other arm back. That was why he felt better having the healer next to him, even if this healer was the weakest fighter. I'll be back after taking a look at the situation outside." The healer sighed and pushed the dragon catcher's hand away. "Come back in 1 minute." The healer nodded his head at the shouting person as he turned the doorknob. Click. The door opened, and the healer immediately left the room. The dragon catcher peeked out the window once the door closed. It was his intuition. His intuition after being defeated at the Roan Kingdom's Hennetus territory once already was telling him something. The kingdom that had hidden a sword master, necromancer, and a dragon probably had something else up their sleeves. He tried to focus in order to be able to fight even though his body was not healed yet. It was at that moment. Click. He heard the sound of the door as well as the healer's hair. The dragon catcher started to smile. This middle-aged healer who looked like a child was sly but listened well. "Hey, hurry back in." It didn't matter to him if the foot soldiers died. He urged the healer who could be of some assistance during battles to hurry back in. Screech, the door opened. Plop. The healer who looked like a child fell to the ground. The dragon catcher could see something red. Fog. The healer was covered by red fog. It then registered in his head. Shit! The dragon catcher immediately stood up from the bed. Bang! However, his body was soon stabbed into the wall by a black aura. Ugh! The dragon catcher let out a groan. He heard a very quiet noise at that moment. He then saw a white glove. The dragon catcher had no choice but to take out the sword of disasters once again. This is the last time I can use it right now. It was difficult to maintain the sword of disasters for a long duration with his current injuries. A loud noise boomed in front of Helmeted Knight again. Boom! The black aura. The sword master who had challenged him at the Hennetus territory, he had appeared again. Choi Han was quietly launching his black aura at the dragon catcher. The dragon catcher barely managed to dodge it. However, he needed to step back once more after barely managing to dodge the first one. Something suddenly appeared at his back as he did that. A white glove. The white glove that the person next to the sword master had put on had appeared behind him. This person had the stealthiness of an assassin and skills at the level of a sword master. Choi Han was in front, and the assassin was in the back. The moment the dragon catcher started to frown, the white glove immediately grabbed his neck. Ugh. A dagger was stabbed and twisted into the stub that was left by his shoulder. It was an extremely painful attack. Choi Han stabbed the dragon catcher in the stomach with his black aura before jumping up into the air. Bang. The ceiling of the cabin was destroyed, and the sky that was covered by red fog became visible. Ugh! The dragon catcher was dragged up above the ceiling while still being held by the neck. His mind was currently in a mess. How did they suddenly appear like this? How did they also know that I was here if they appeared just now? Although Cal knew this thanks to the whale tribe's information and Rayon's magic, the dragon catcher and the old mage who were not at Rayon's level of magic had no way of knowing this. Ugh, ugh. He glared at the man who was slowly choking him tighter and tighter. It was an old man in his 60s. Ron smiled back at the dragon catcher. He, who had borrowed his son's white gloves, stood in front of his young master. They were currently at the top of the ship at the center of the enemy fleet. Cal looked toward Choi Han and Ron, who had dragged the dragon catcher here, and started to speak. This was the first time the dragon catcher heard any of them say something. Let's get started. Ooh, woo, woo, woo. The silence was broken by what sounded like the cries of a ghost. Something that sounded like hundreds of souls crying started to rise up from the ocean. The dragon catcher had no choice but to see everything because he was at the highest spot. No, he could feel it. Tap. The dragon catcher turned his head after feeling someone tapping on his cheek. Cal Hennetus was smiling brightly at him. The helmeted knight started to speak. Why, you had another ancient power. Tap, tap. Cal tapped on the dragon catcher's cheek and started to speak. Take a good look. Ooh, 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 oh, the noise that sounded like ghosts crying was coming up from the bottom of the ocean. Cal whispered to the dragon catcher. The cries of the ghosts are scary. The bottom of the ocean started to roar. Ooh, 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 oh, the noise stopped and a tornado shot up. Bang, bang. Cal's ancient power and Rayon's magic worked together in order to create this tornado in the middle of the red fog. Cal's eyes that were no longer smiling were focused on the dragon slayer. He remembered his promise to everyone. Obliterate the enemy. Cal Hennetus, no, Kim Rock-Soo, was someone who kept his word. Now he just needed to keep that promise. 1. Interesting how the author uses Dragon Slayer and then changes to Dragon Catcher in the next sentence. 2. The Raws said snood, so I stuck with it. But it is more like a neck vein when literally translated. Chapter 204. The ocean is... 4. Of course, this method of keeping his word was Cal's personal philosophy. Bang, the tornado shot up and crashed into the ship. The mast started to shake and tilted to the side, and then... it broke. The Indomitable Alliance was being attacked on two sides from the sky and the ocean, however. There was no visible enemy attacking them. Only one person, the dragon catcher, had enemies in front of him. The dragon slayer, the helmeted knight, looked toward the ocean and became at a loss for words. He heard continuous noises of things breaking. He also heard people screaming. There were people using magic against the red fog and the tornado even though no enemies were there. There were also some knights blankly slashing their swords at the air. Turn the ships. We need to get away from the fog and the tornadoes. The few people who managed to come to their senses avoided the fog and started to shout from inside magic shields. The dragon catcher who was watching this suddenly thought about someone. Why isn't the old mage doing anything? Why isn't he coming to save me? He didn't like the damn bastard, but the old mage was good at differentiating people based on their rank. It was weird that such a person was still quiet. He should have done something by now. Perhaps. The dragon catcher heard someone's voice in his ear. Looks like you have time to think about other things even when someone is choking you. It was Cal. Of course, Cal had intentionally given the dragon slayer an opening to think about other things. Only then would he truly understand his present situation. They were out on the open sea. For Cal, the ocean had to be somewhere that the enemy had nothing to rely on. Cal explained the situation to the helmeted knight in a friendly manner. What is it? Is it weird that the mage has not responded? How do you know about the mage? It was before the knight could even finish his sentence. Boom! There was an explosion that was much stronger than the others. The dragon catcher's face turned toward it. He saw a pillar of water and a bright light clashing at the ship at the front of the fleet. It was not that the mage had not done anything. He could not do anything. He was currently under attack. Cal whispered into the dragon slayer's ear once more. You know that I have a dragon. Cal's voice sounded happy. On the other hand, the helmeted knight felt chills on the back of his neck. His eyes turned toward Cal. Who would think of this guy as a just hero? And how could this person have 3 different ancient powers in his body? Cal's plate was the worst that he had ever seen. It was maybe as big as a fly's plate. So how was this possible? Even if he had regeneration abilities, the wood and wind would clash in a few years and he would eventually die in pain. Perhaps extraordinary. An unbelievable thought crossed through the dragon slayer's mind. There was a sensation suddenly surrounding him. Boom, boom. An ancient power inside his body was reacting to something. The sword of disasters was sending him a warning. His gaze headed downward. To be specific, it headed toward Cal's hand. He could see the small red thunderbolt crackling on top of Cal's palm. Fire. It was a fire that was even stronger than the volcano within the sword of disasters. Such a power could be felt coming from this small red thunderbolt. The strongest destructive power could be felt in it as well, fire and thunder. These were the strongest powers that could shoot up from the ground and strike down from the sky. The two gathered together in order to amplify the strength of the fire. The helmeted knight's mouth started to shake. Extraordinary, an unbelievable situation had become a reality. No way. Did he gather all 5 elements? Is that why his body is not exploding? Are the regeneration power and a balance of 5 elements keeping this glass egg of a plate stable? He could see that Cal was looking down at him. How could you gather so many ancient powers? Because I am different than you. Cal's calm voice asked in response. You are an artificial dragon slayer. Am I right? The dragon slayer's pupils started to shake. On the other hand, Cal was calm. He recalled one of the facts that guardian knight Clope Seca had told him. He is supposedly a fake dragon slayer. Furthermore, the rest of ARM's high-ranking members that are accompanying the Indomitable Alliance are a mage and a healer. He is said to have grown after eating the latest ancient dragon that died about 200 years ago. Ancient dragons right before their death were said to be better to eat than adult dragons. Especially for this knight who had the sword of disasters, dragon corpses were said to be the best medicine. However, this fake dragon slayer needed the sword of disasters and something else to become a complete dragon slayer. He needed a relic that had been passed down through generations. A crown. The dragon slayer needed the crown that drinks dragon blood in order to have a dragon-like body. Cal remembered how Clope had snitched to him in anger. But some bastards, sigh, ended up stealing it. Ugh. Beecrox had struck Clopay's head with the whip once more when he said that. Because I'm the bastard who stole it. Cal had held back his laughter. Boom, boom. Something inside his body was currently going wild. The glutton priestess started to speak to Cal. Am I eating this too? The ancient power that was currently the most active in Cal's body right now. The sound of the wind. The shield was lusting after that power right now. She continuously showed her greed and gluttony to Cal. Unfortunately, Cal could not help but shake his head no at the priestess's question. Why, my greed is pretty strong as well. Ancient powers move themselves to a special spot or an item once the owner of the power dies. The indestructible shield landed in a tree. The vitality of the heart was in the rock tower. The fire of destruction was in the pig sculpture. The sound of the wind was in the spinning top that was underneath a boulder. They quietly wait there until the next owner comes around. You didn't automatically gain the ancient power by killing the current owner. If that was the case, there would be no reason for ancient powers to disappear for long periods of time. The glutton priestess started to speak inside of Cal's mind again. I really can't eat this. The sound of the wind. Another ability. The shield's greed for other powers was endless. However, Cal shook his head internally. No, not today. My plate is still lacking. I can't overdo it anymore. Most importantly, although he did not have anything to give to the shield today, there was something to give himself. If ancient powers don't get transferred and moved to a special place or item, it was simple. All I have to do is pick it up. Then it would be mine. Cal's eyes focused on the dragon slayer. The hunter who had found his prey started to speak. He recalled what he had planned on doing with this prey. Beat him to death. Unfortunately, Cal lacked the strength to do that. This body had become even weaker and less muscular than originally. These were the times he thought about the muscles he had when he was still Kim Rock-Soo. However, wasn't the reason he looked for ancient powers so that he didn't have to do such difficult physical training. Cal's finger pointed at the dragon slayer. That action made the dragon slayer flinch. Cal started to speak at that moment. Throw him? What? The dragon slayer felt his body being lifted up before he could even question what was going on. Yes, young Master Nim. The dragon catcher was thrown into the air along with Ron's response. His eyes opened wide. And no, rumble, something was beyond the red fog. He could hear the sky rumbling. The dragon slayer's eyes opened wide. Flash. It was the moment he had thought the night sky flashed in the color of blood. Bang. Ah, he had no choice but to be hit by the red thunderbolt striking down at him. He activated the Sword of Disaster's volcano attribute, but it was useless. An even stronger power had gulped up his body. How does that bastard have such a power? His body started to burn black. The thunderbolt had accurately attacked only him. Boom, his body fell back down to the ship. Ugh. The dragon catcher's body started to twitch. He looked like a worm, or maybe a snake, as he twitched on the ground. As though the remains of the red thunderbolt were not going out. Instead, they continued to dig into his body. Just as he was twitching on the ground, the thunderbolt became like a snake and slithered through his body. However, the dragon catcher who had eaten an ancient dragon that someone had gotten for him still had a strong body. He still had his sight, his hearing, and his sense of smell. He could also speak. Tap. The dragon catcher could see a shoe in front of him. His twitching body suddenly stopped moving. He could hear someone's voice through his ears that were still able to hear. It was Cal. Cal thought about the ancient powers that the dragon catcher had in his body. 1. The Sword of Disasters. 2. The power to control wyverns. Furthermore, he remembered what the World Tree had told him. The person who is collecting ancient powers has collected a total of 3 ancient powers. The dragon catcher could hear Cal's voice. Why aren't you using your last ancient power? You have 1 more. The helmeted knight felt a sense of fear. How much does he know? The dragon catcher's body twitched for a different reason. He had thought that the guardian knight bastard Clopay Seca had snitched about everything. However, the fact that he had 3 ancient powers was something that only he and that crazy bastard knew about. How does he know? His face that was burnt black slowly looked toward the sky. However, the only thing that he could see was the smiling Cal's face. Hurry up and show me. Cal was speaking quite gently. So I can have that too. Since his eyes were still fine, the dragon catcher could clearly see the way that Cal was looking at him. He shouted out in astonishment at the same time. How could I, to you? The burns made his mouth rip and bleed every time he opened his mouth. However, he could not keep his mouth shut. He felt something suddenly overwhelming him. It was an aura that seemed to only belong to someone who rules over everything. The person who dreamed of becoming a complete dragon slayer immediately realized the true identity of this aura. The dominating aura. The useless scam of a power. However, that power was currently making it difficult for him to breathe. His body that was currently crawling on the ground could not even handle such a hallucination. This is something I cannot keep to myself. That was the thought going through his mind, the dominating aura. There was also the regeneration ability and the ancient powers of 5 different elements. This was someone who ignored the fact that his plate was weak. This was something that broke all of the rules. However, the dragon catcher knew that it was possible because he too was someone who had overcome the limits of the human body. There were always existences that were an exception to the rules of nature in the world. Furthermore, nobody knew what those exceptions were capable of doing. He was thinking that he needed to share this information with Arm, however, that thought quickly disappeared as he started to think about something else. Will I even be able to survive? The crazy Cal Hennetus. This person had hidden his ancient powers from other people and acted like a good and just noble, hiding the fact that he could do such a vicious attack. Could he survive and escape the hands of such a person? Since he was a smart person whose mind moved quite well when it came to doing bad things, the Dragon Slayer could accurately identify Cal's personality. I've been tricked. He had been tricked by Cal. He didn't know how he had been tricked, but his instincts were telling him that the reason everything had gone awry was because he had been tricked by this bastard. I'll tell you everything. That was why he was quickly trying to find a way to survive. This will be useful to you. The crown will be beneficial to you if you have the dominating aura. You know about the crown, right? I will bring that to you. I will also tell you all of the secrets about Arm as well. I swear. He could not even feel the pain in his body as he urgently shouted out. At the same time, he felt relief after seeing Cal's reaction to his statements. It was at that moment. Whether you speak or not, Cal slowly took the crown out of his magic bag, whether the dragon catcher talked or not. I'm the one who will decide that. The dragon catcher's eyes opened wide as he looked at the crown. He was shocked and had a blank expression on his face. His mind turned white as fear filled his body. He's worse than that bastard, Arm's White Star. He had met him only once, but Cal was even worse than him. Why? Siram, you've seen the face of the head of the organization, right? That bastard did not know about Cal Hennetus's existence. However, Cal knew about him. That difference was huge. The dragon catcher quickly nodded his head to show Cal, who called him by his name, that he had indeed seen the head before. He was wearing a mask, so I don't know his face, but I've seen him. Your body is too weak right now to show me the final ancient power, right? Right. But I'll show you if you want. The dragon catcher Siram tried to continue the conversation with a smile as it seemed to be going well. However, the burns on his face, as well as the fact that they were still burning, made it impossible to see the smile. Bang. He could still hear the sound of people screaming and things breaking. However, there was no noise of the Roan kingdom, the enemy, within those noises. The only noises were those of his poisoned allies and their ships breaking. Siram looked toward Cal with desperation. Cal opened his mouth to speak. I don't need it. What? I don't really need to see your ancient power. Cal turned away from Siram. I'm going to pick it up anyway. I just need to go figure it out at that point. Cal walked over to the people behind him. Ron, make it so he is only capable of talking. Ron touched his son's white glove as he started to smile. Cal had no plan on letting the dragon catcher Siram die peacefully since he dared to harm his people. He was not the only one who felt this way. Cal then added on. Leave something for Rayon, Choi Han, and Mary as well. I'll be there after them. I understand, young Master Nim. Rayon walked past Cal toward the dragon catcher. Cal walked over to Choi Han's side and observed the night ocean. He started to speak. "We're here." The right moment had arrived. Cal started to move using the sound of the wind. "Ah, move the ship just a little more. We're almost at the end." A mage from the Indomitable Alliance used a magic shield in order to defend against the poisonous fog as he shouted toward the navigator. The navigator heard the mage's voice, as well as the sounds of soldiers falling off the broken ships. "Ugh, ugh!" He also heard his fellow shipmate dying next to him. His hand started to shake as he continued to navigate the ship. "I need to survive." That was the only thought in his head as he avoided the roaring whirlpools and barely managed to steer through the poisonous fog. Yes, just a little more. The mage was protecting the navigator, the elite knights, and himself as he continued to urge them onward. There was the slightest chance of hope if they could get out of this poisonous fog. He could see the red, poisonous fog started to turn fainter. Just a little more. There was a smile of relief on his face. However, he could not help but speak in shock in a moment. "Huh." There was something dark red in the distance beyond the red fog. We avoided the whirlpool." The navigator shouted with joy. However, he had to soon greet the red ship at the other side of the whirlpool. There were numerous ships surrounding the area at the end of the poison fog. These red ships resembled the red fog. They could also see a golden ship at the front of these red ships. Cal, who had returned to his original location at some point, was standing on the golden ship's deck as he touched the sculpture of the Hennetus family crest, the golden turtle, and started to speak to these people who barely managed to escape from hell. "I was waiting for you." The enemy who had barely managed to get past the poisonous fog had to now meet a real ghost. The people who wanted them dead were the ghosts. Cal gave the order, "Obliterate the enemy." Numerous arrows and spells flew over the night ocean. Chapter 205. The ocean is 5. It was not easy to cross through the rough winter ocean. That was why the navigators who sailed through the Northern Ocean were all experts. The Northern Alliance had only recruited the best of these experts. However, none of that mattered. Bang. The true ocean of death revealed itself to the navigators who had barely managed to wade through the whirlpools in order to get out of the red fog. Maintain your formation. Launch the cannons. The soldiers of the Indomitable Alliance finally got back to their senses and started to move. There was fear in their faces. Tap, tap. Their comrades' corpses got in their way as they tried to quickly move around. However, they did not have time to notice this issue. Ugh! There was a soldier on the ground who was poisoned, but not yet dead. His body was stepped on by another soldier. However, the soldier just glanced toward this poisoned soldier before moving on. He was thinking that he too would die if he took the time to stop to help. The soldier just continued to move while stepping on corpses. Some of them had been paying attention to where they were walking until just a moment ago. However, they could no longer do that. "Move quickly if you don't want to be buried at sea," one of the knights shouted toward the soldiers. "Start rowing if you want to be able to take your friends' corpses back home." They needed to survive in order to care for their friends' bodies. Otherwise, they would all die out here, and nobody would be able to find any of their bodies. It had not been like this when they had first headed out with a fleet of 300 ships. They thought that they could destroy anything and everything at that point. However, the result was the opposite. It was their enemy who seemed ready to destroy anything and everything. Refill the gunpowder? Where are the archers? The deck was chaotic. The knights got in formation while the mages started to fire off spells. Bang, bang, many of the arrows bounced off of the mages' magic shields and knights' shields. One mage from the Perun kingdom could not help but swear after seeing the rain of arrows. Damn it! When did they prepare such a thing? They could see a fleet of red ships almost comparable to their own in number. How could the Roan kingdom? The Roan kingdom's proclamation in response to their own was full of confidence. However, the majority of the Western continent's kingdoms did not put much attention on the Roan kingdom. This was because there had been nothing special about them for decades. So how could they suddenly have such strong forces? How could they possess such powerful naval capabilities? If a single kingdom had such an immense naval presence, why didn't they dominate the sea? This mage from the Perun kingdom created an even bigger shield with magic as he ordered his subordinates. Immediately activate fire or lightning atta. He wanted to tell them to do that. However, he had to urgently change his command. He could see fire orbs in the distance. Tens of magic orbs flew up into the sky at the same time. How could the Roan kingdom put forth such a magic attack? The navy, the magic. The mage used magic on his eyes in order to broaden his viewpoint as he urgently shouted. Shields. Tens of fire orbs attacked the ships that had just escaped from the whirlpools. Ugh! The mage, who barely managed to defend with shield magic, looked toward the front of the fleet of red ships with his magnified viewpoint. He could see a large number of red ships. Some members of the mage brigade were on each of the ships. The Perun kingdom's mage looked toward the robed individuals and was unable to close his dropped jaw. Crazy. How does the Roan kingdom have so many mages? What is going on? The mage's gaze shifted. He could see a robed mage floating up into the air. However, he was wrong in his assumption, as this was not a mage. This was someone floating up using a wind elemental. The dark elf Tasha focused her attention on the voice coming from below her. One more time. Cal gave the order. Tasha raised up both of her arms. The tens of mages in Mage Brigade 1 cast their magic at the same time. Crackle, crackle. Orbs infused with lightning power shot up into the sky. Tasha used the wind to amplify her voice in order to deliver the military commander's order. Attack. The orbs shot toward the ships once again. Cal watched the attack before starting to speak. Move the ships. That order was shared with a few of the red ships via a magic communication device. The knight captain who was on one of those red ships took out his sword. Clang. The moment the rest of the knights took out their swords in response, the ship moved to stop in front of a mid-sized military ship belonging to the enemy. Cal's voice reached the knight captain's ear through the communication device. Slash the enemy's necks. Tap. The knight captain heard the sound of someone charging forward before him. He could not stand still after hearing that. He started to speak. Follow. The knight captain started to move. He only needed to give a simple order. They just had to follow the person in front of them. The knight captain jumped up and landed on the deck of the enemy ship. The other knights followed behind him, some using their physical abilities to jump while others used ladders to climb onto the enemy ship. They were all moving without any hesitation while looking at a single person's back. They could see the injured shoulder that was wrapped in bandages. However, the Roan Kingdom's royal knights could see the black aura in the person's other hand. The first sword master of the Roan Kingdom in a long time. Choi Han was taking action even though Cal had told him to rest. His blood was boiling. He could not sit still. In the end, Cal ended up giving him permission to act. Do whatever you want. I'm sure you'll take care of yourself. However, just know that I will not take you around with me if you get any more injuries. Choi Han knew that Cal meant what he had said. That was why he remembered this order as he continued to move. The first brigade of the Royal Knights followed behind him. Sword masters were known to have reached the apex of the sword. There was nothing for the Roan Kingdom's knights to fear as long as that black aura was in front of them. Bang! The black aura destroyed a cabin on the enemy ship. Cal was standing on the strongest and safest golden ship at a distance as he watched Choi Han destroy the enemy ship. That guy really is amazing. Cal was thinking that Choi Han definitely deserved to be the main character as he leisurely looked around the battlefield. Choi Han was starting to develop his identity as a hero. I can relax a bit now. The large golden turtle sculpture was next to him. Cal's red hair stood out on the golden ship, drawing everyone's attention toward him. There were many nobles on this ship that was the largest and strongest ship in the fleet. The nobles, who needed to get on Cal's good side, could not hide in the cabins, so they put on their strong armors and stood behind him on the deck. These were the Northeast region's nobles who had once followed the Southeast region and Central region's powers. They could not say anything while watching what was going on in front of them. Ships were getting destroyed. People were dying. But it was not their ships or their people. The nobles sighed in relief as their minds became complicated at these new facts that they had just learned about. One of the nobles who had been pushing for the southeast region to take control touched the back of his neck. The Rhone kingdom had such a strong navy. The crown prince was said to have prepared the naval base. Seeing the size and strength of the navy, as well as the mage brigade that was sent to assist them, this noble quickly realized why the crown prince would be succeeding the throne. But there was also another piece of information that shocked them all. I didn't know that the Hennetus family contributed 1/3 of the funds required to build the naval base. Won the Ubar territory by the Rhone kingdom's shoreline, the Rhone kingdom's crown prince, and the wealthy Hennetus territory. The nobles feared the Hennetus territory the most after the partnership was revealed. Cough. The noble heard a quiet voice at that moment. He looked back toward the front. The person standing in front of him was Cal Hennetus. The Northeast region's military commander was wiping his mouth with his sleeve. He could see a bit of blood on the sleeve. However, the noble could not say anything. At first, he had felt fear about the Hennetus territory. He was scared of this territory in the corner that had quietly been growing their strength. However, a different emotion other than fear had taken over. He could hear Cal giving the mage brigade an order. Activate the shields. Protect the soldiers. The mages immediately created magic shields in order to protect the soldiers from the enemy mages' attacks. The enemy was being obliterated without hurting their allies. It was a one-sided battle. Nobody would have expected that the Rhone kingdom would have dominated the indomitable alliance like this. The nobles who had personally experienced this unexpected situation had a different emotion stirring in their minds. The nobles heard one of the nobles speaking at that moment. The Hennetus household was originally the Northeast region's guardian household. They had forgotten about it because they had been at a time of peace for a long time. Although the Hennetus household was now known as a wealthy household, they were originally known as a martial arts household. Ever since the Rhone kingdom had been founded in this land, the Hennetus household had guarded the entrance to the Forest of Darkness, defending the Northeast region and the entire Rhone kingdom underneath. Marquis Ainz's household was currently known as the greatest martial arts household in the Rhone kingdom. While the Ainz household had chosen the best land in the Rhone kingdom's southeast region, the Hennetus household had chosen to go to this remote corner, even though they were a famed household at that time. They had chosen to go toward the Forest of Darkness, where the strongest monsters were known to roam. The nobles seemed to realize something at this point. Their gazes all headed toward Cal's back. Their hearts were filled with thrill and anticipation now that their fear was gone. The nobles could see Cal Hennetus frowning in the front. He could not even properly clean the blood on his sleeve as he focused on the battlefield in front of him. However, there was no hesitation as he gave the orders to the soldiers and mages. He seemed reliable. At the same time, they felt a sense of regret. They had gotten on this ship, but it was too late. The real people were not on this strong ship, but on the battlefield. The people who had the qualifications to go down in history were already making history on their own. This one noble bit down on his lips. He wanted to say something to Cal, but he could only frown as he did not dare to approach Cal. That was why the noble was suppressing his excitement and remaining quiet. All of the nobles were almost staring at Cal's back. However, Cal did not feel any of their gazes right now. He started to frown even more. I'm hungry. He was not bleeding much because he had controlled the fire of destruction's fiery thunderbolt. However, he was still hungry. It wasn't like he could just sit down and eat a steak in the middle of the battle. This was making him annoyed. Cal heard a voice in his mind at that moment. Not as weak human, we caught the mage. Cal started to smile. Rayon had captured the old mage. The healer and the dragon catcher were already captured by the father-son duo of Ron and Beacrox. Rayon's voice continued on in his mind. But I'm sorry. Sorry. The corners of Cal's lips that had been going up stopped moving. Rayon explained himself in Cal's mind. Not as weak human, you told me to bring him alive, but he is barely hanging on. He's right about to die. He is still alive. I fed him a potion, but he will still die in about 2 days. Doesn't matter then. Cal started to smile again. We also captured the magic spearman. He is fine. Let's throw him to Sword Master Hannah. Cal was very satisfied. The magic spearman was the one who had been close to the sword master and fake holy maiden, Hannah, when Cal's group had clashed against arm during the whale's battle with the mermaids. The fake holy maiden was itching to get her hands on the people who had stabbed her in the back, so she would be very happy if they handed the magic spearman to her. Cal raised his hand with satisfaction. The nobles all flinched after seeing him suddenly raise his hand. However, young Lady Amaru, as well as the dark elf Tasha, the two people right next to Cal, understood his order. Cal started to speak. Prepare for a full assault. The order for the final attack was delivered to all of the ships. At that moment, the nobles felt the atmosphere starting to change. The wind started to blow. The wind was gathering inside the red fog. The mage captain shouted out an order. Larok 7? Uwuong, the mages all raised their hands up in the air. Numerous smaller strands of mana gathered together into 7 orbs. One of the formations for the former Whipper Kingdom's mages with Rosalind at the center slowly revealed itself over the ocean. Furthermore, the royal knights that had been running rampant on enemy ships returned to their own red ship at that moment. Fire! Do not give them any openings. The soldiers were still shooting endless volleys of arrows at the indomitable alliance. Splash, splash. The red ship slowly started to retreat. Ubar Territory's coast. The Roan Kingdom's navy that had trained alongside the whirlpools that Cal had left behind was much more talented than the northern navigators. Splash, splash. The rowing soldiers put more strength into each row. The ships slowly retreated in formation. Hundreds of ships all retreated from the poisonous fog at once. It was a grand spectacle to watch. The nobles watching this did not find it odd that they could see all of this clearly even though it was night time. They did not have time to focus on the fact that it was starting to get brighter. Cal looked toward the retreated knights and the mages who had prepared their attack. He then heard Rayon's voice. Finished, Cal started to speak. Attack. Cal's hand was lowered. The red fog changed at that moment. Swoosh, the calm fog started to change. The red poisonous fog started to roar. It resembled the snowstorm that covered the lake surrounding the world tree. Ugh! The harsh wind made the nobles and soldiers cover their eyes. It felt as if they would be swept up by the poisonous fog at any moment. It was at that moment. The mage captain's quiet voice could be heard through the wind. Fire! Fire! It was as if they were firing weapons. The 7 orbs of mana in the mage's hands, these orbs of 7 different attributes flew toward the red fog and the enemy. It was the moment the 7 orbs touched the poisonous fog tornado. Boom! A large explosion occurred. The entire ocean roared. Even the nobles and soldiers on the golden ship had to hold on because of the shock from the explosion. Ugh! Eek, so strong. Already unable to see because of the blast, they struggled to stand still once the waves started to roar. They heard people screaming and ships breaking as the explosion continued on. The enemies were dying. They all sensed it in their hearts. The noises started to disappear as the water calmed back down. See, Commander Nim? The nobles slowly raised their heads after hearing young Lady Amaru, who was in charge of communications on her mother's behalf, calling for the commander. The commander. Did something happen to the commander? The shocked nobles urgently raised their heads. They could then see the calm ocean. At the same time, they could also see Cal, who was looking at young Lady Amaru. Looks like I kept my promise. One of the nobles stood up as if he had been possessed after hearing that statement. He staggered a bit because he had not yet regained his balance. However, he could soon see Cal and the ocean beyond the ship. Something he had not realized until now finally clicked. The ocean was getting brighter. The sun was rising. The red fog was no longer covering the ocean. All he could see were dead bodies and broken debris. Something caught the soldiers' and nobles' eyes at that moment. They all looked toward the direction of the rising sun. It was the spot that the rays of the sun were currently focused on. The archers lowered their bows. The navigators let go of their ropes and the rowers let go of their rows. Clang, an archer's arrow fell to the ground. They heard their leader's voice at that moment. Inform the kingdom. The soldiers slowly started to raise their arms. They heard their leader, Cal's voice. Cal was looking into the video communication device in young lady Amaru's arms as he continued to speak. "We are victorious. Inform the kingdom. We are victorious. There are no more enemies on the ocean." The soldiers raised their arms into the air and started to cheer. Ah, woo-woo-woo-woo-woo-oh. Relief, joy, and excitement. These shouts that were full of all three of these emotions echoed across the ocean. We survived and were victorious. We kept our promise. The soldiers started to shout these things as well. The sun rose up in order to welcome the day for the Roan kingdom. The red ships started to move once again. They were heading toward the golden ship. They were heading toward Cal Henetus. They all cheered as they gathered around their leader. 1. PR, only 1/3. I thought it would be more, to be honest. Chapter 206. You're back. 1. The red ships surrounded the golden ship. Choi Han and the knight captain jumped aboard the golden ship and stopped behind Cal. The dark elf Tasha and young lady Amaru were also standing behind Cal. "Calnim," Choi Han called out toward Cal as the representative. He could see the ocean that Cal was currently looking at. There were corpses floating up next to the debris. Choi Han slowly approached Cal. He could see the frown on Cal's face. He really has a soft heart. Cal started to speak. How peaceful. His voice sounded tired. Fatigue was evident in every word he spoke. Everybody became quiet after hearing Cal's tone. Although he had said something nice, the weight and sorrow in his voice made them all shut up. One of the nobles suddenly thought about something after hearing the word peaceful. He was able to recall this information because he had been thinking about the Henetus household this entire battle. He subconsciously said it out loud. There is no reason to be recorded in history. Live for peace and happiness. The unexpected voice made everyone turn their gazes toward the noble who spoke. The nobles tilted their heads at this statement that sounded somewhat familiar. They felt as if they had heard it before, but they could not remember clearly where they had heard it. Cal responded to the noble at that moment. "I guess you know of our family motto." The Henetus household's motto. The expressions on the faces of the nobles quickly changed. Figuring out the source of this statement made them unable to speak. They could see the look of sorrow on Cal's face even as he started to smile. The people on board could tell how much weight the phrase, peace and happiness, had on the Henetus family. "Ho," one of the nobles let out a gasp. He had been jealous of how Cal had played a pivotal role in a historic battle. However, the person who made that contribution preferred peace and happiness rather than fame. The noble who had gasped realized something. Having that mindset probably allowed him to be able to do this. He had heard that Count Henetus had opened up their wallets in order to provide food and farming tools to the citizens. He had also spent money on the naval base and the castle wall. The Henetus household's mindset, the reason they had stayed out of the fight for power until now. They had only moved for the peace and happiness of the Roan kingdom. Silence filled the deck once again. At that moment, Cal was also thinking about his family motto. There is no reason to be recorded in history. Live for peace and happiness instead. The people of old truly were wise. Cal was in awe of his ancestors' mindset. Forget history, being full and warm was the best. Thinking about that made Cal think that he was suffering right now. He started to frown even more. He was not just suffering now, he was starving. What did I ever do to deserve this? Cal started to speak to console himself, knowing that he was suffering now in order to have 50 years of peace. Cal's desire to go home and lay around in bed was relayed to the red ships surrounding them. "Let's go back." Everybody heard his voice. "To our land. Let's go back to our land." The Roan kingdom's citizens bit down on their lips instead of cheering. They had somewhere to return to, and they were alive and able to go home. They were feeling at peace for still being alive instead of joy for their overwhelming victory. The 300 ships that resembled the migration of birds were gone, while the golden ship and red ships returned back home. Of course, not all of the ships were returning. The few ships that did not return under Cal's command remained on the peaceful ocean. These ships were left here in order to find the enemy corpses that were either floating or sinking into the ocean. Although he should be cold and cruel for their enemies, Cal knew that there were many people who were sinless and happened to become soldiers in order to survive. Cal watched the remaining ships finish surveying the area before turning around. The golden ship made its way back to shore. This was the thought on Cal's mind as he touched the golden turtle sculpture. I'm so hungry. I'll eat as soon as I get back. To speak of the results, Cal did not get to do that when he got back. There was too much for him to do. Cal could not help but laugh. Ha ha ha, his laughter was echoing inside the underground prison. He brushed his face with both hands once he was done laughing about it. He had not felt like this in a long time. I shouldn't have trusted them. Cal lowered his hands to see someone on the ground. It was an old man wearing a robe with a single red star. It was the old mage from Arm. Cal looked at the old man and shared his sentiments. He really is barely alive. Rayon had said that. He is alive, but barely breathing. He's right about to die, however, he is still alive. The old man truly was right at the edge of death's door. His entire body was injured. His skin was blue as if he had been hit by all sorts of magic spells and poison. His mana circle must have also broken during the battle, as the skin in front of where his heart would be was black. Cal turned toward Rayon, who was not invisible as they were the only ones there. Rayon slowly avoided his gaze as On and Hong slowly walked away toward the corner of the underground prison with Rayon. Rayon started to mumble. Are not as weak human bled. They needed to not only bleed, but their blood needed to pour out. They shouldn't be allowed to have an easy death. We need to rip them to shreds and then cut off their necks. I agree. Our youngest did a good job this time. We did too. Cal decided to let it go since even the silver kitten, On, agreed with the other two, the children averaging 9 years old. What could he really expect from such children? It seemed that having a discussion with the old mage was not possible. That was disappointing. That was why he turned toward the other two people who had only one red star on their robes. He could also see Beacrox taking off his previously white gloves and throwing them aside. Plop. The gloves landed on the table with the torture instruments. The gloves had long turned black from dried blood. Beacrox brushed back his hair as he reported to Cal. They are currently unconscious, but they should be able to talk once they wake up. They would only be able to speak. Cal looked away from the fake dragon catcher and the healer who were currently approaching the gates of hell. He could then see someone else. Gasp. That person gasped as soon as they made eye contact, the magic spearman. It was the person who used both magic and spear arts, the same one they had frequently met while fighting against Arm. He gasped as soon as they made eye contact and tried to turn away, however. He could not do that. It is not respectful to turn away when our young master Nim is looking at you. Ron, who grabbed the magic spearman by the hair, made it impossible for the magic spearman to look away. The magic spearman could not even look at Ron as he started to shake in fear. Cal found this to be odd. The magic spearman is not injured at all, so why is he the most scared? The confused Cal looked toward Ron. Ron smiled back at him, which was enough for Cal to understand why. I guess the scariest old man is next to him. It would be abnormal if he was not afraid. Cal looked back toward the shaking magic spearman. He then casually asked, "This is your first time meeting me, right?" The magic spearman could not say anything. All sorts of emotions were in his eyes right now. This response made Cal smile. On and Hong's poisonous fog, Choi Han's black aura, and Ron's stealth and assassination skills. The magic spearman had definitely seen these before. It was at the 10-Finger Mountains. The magic spearman had seen these experts at the valley with the elf village. Of course, what he had seen were these people wearing the fake Arm outfits, the same people who had always got in Arm's way. Arm was angry about these people, but had no way of knowing their identities. The magic spearman had faced those same people in this last battle. The magic spearman looked up at Cal Henetus. No, he looked up at the leader of the group that got in Arm's way numerous times. That leader then slowly crouched down and made eye contact with the magic spearman. "You know who I am, don't you?" It was a gentle question. However, this gentle question made the magic spearman's eyes shake even more. In the end, he lowered his gaze toward the ground. He heard Cal's voice at that moment. You seem to be at least a bit smart. You know when to speak and when not to speak." That statement made the magic spearman's back turn cold. It was as if Cal was saying that this was not the first time they had met, and that he would not live to see another day if he told anybody about Cal's identity. Ron tried to pull on the magic spearman's hair in order to make him make eye contact with Cal, however. The magic spearman did not raise his head to look at Cal until the end. He kept his gaze focused on the ground. He knew the difference between people he should look at and the people he should not look at. "You really are smart." The moment he heard Cal's voice, the magic spearman felt a sense of relief. He could still feel Cal Hennetus looking at him. What could their true identities be? He had heard that Cal was a just young master who needed to recover, so what was this cold appearance? The magic spearman did not have such thoughts. It would show on his face if he did. He just chose to look down at the ground and think about nothing. Cal quietly observed the magic spearman. The fake holy maiden, Hannah. He had told her to treat him like her own older brother. Although Hannah had truly considered them to be siblings, the magic spearman had only been acting. The people who stabbed people in the back were always the wittiest. Cal opened his mouth to speak. "I should keep you separated from the others since you know who I am." Flinch. The magic spearman closed his eyes. He was in big trouble. He had just done whatever he needed to do to survive. So how did he end up in such a mess? Everything had gone wrong ever since the fake holy maiden got away. The magic spearman lowered his head and Cal gave Ron an order. "Keep him separated, but don't torture him. Just make it so he cannot run away. Block his mana and aura as well. Don't torture him." Those words made the magic spearman relieved. This was the noble who had kept his identity hidden as he caused havoc for Arm. He was safe from the scary methods of this noble for the time being. However, the magic spearman could not see the look in Cal's group's eyes because his head was down. Ron moved the magic spearman to a different prison. Choi Han, who was looking at the magic spearman's back, subconsciously started to speak. "It looks like he will have the most painful death. Of course, Hannah is going to kill him." The magic spearman would be handed over to the fake holy maiden, Hannah, and would probably beg to be tortured by Ron or Beecrox instead. Cal left Beecrox and Choi Han in charge of watching over the 3 Arm members. It should not be difficult as their auras and manas were sealed and there was poison in their bodies. Watch them properly. Beecrox confidently responded back to Cal. "If I make a mistake, it will be that I accidentally killed them. There will be no other types of mistakes." He really is Ron's son. Cal blankly stared at Beecrox before noticing Choi Han nodding in agreement and turning away from both of them. Those two would probably be more thorough than him. The White Star. I need to have them describe his appearance. These 3 were the only ones within Cal's grasp who knew what the White Star looked like. He needed to wake them up at least once in order to get that information. That would be very painful for the 3 of them, but that was none of Cal's business. Why would he care about people who tried to kill him? What about the people in his territory that were hurt because of them? Cal headed toward another underground prison. He went to see someone whom he had secretly brought over. Hiya. Guardian Knight Clope Seca started to shake as he moved his chained arms in order to bow down to Cal. He looked as if he was serving a god. Clope seemed to have healed a bit. The person who was responsible for healing the Guardian Knight started to speak. "Young Master Nim?" A GPS-like voice. Cal started to speak to the necromancer Mary, who was not a part of the naval battle. "Let's go." "Yes, sir." Mary was guarding the Guardian Knight. Clack, clack. The skeleton pieces she had been putting together stopped moving. Cal pointed toward the Guardian Knight as Rayon arrived in his invisible form. "Pack him up." "Pack the bags." That's the type of tone Cal seemed to be using as he pointed at Clope. The whale tribe went to attack the Perun kingdom. Then what should I do next? Cal knew what he had to do. The whale tribe had no thoughts about conquering the Perun kingdom. They were just doing this to get their revenge. Cal had made up his mind after watching them. Let's hit their backs. He was going to plan a mole in the Indomitable Alliance. The same Perun kingdom that had fabricated a legend in order to monopolize everything for themselves. How would it feel to have that kingdom underneath the Roan kingdom's feet and use them as spies? Cal's gaze slowly headed toward Clope. The plan would take place when the Indomitable Alliance least expected it. They would hit them from the back. Chapter 207. You're back too. Cal slowly approached Clope. Clope, who was currently tied up with Rayon's magic, was dominated by fear. Clope stiffened up like a person that was cursed as soon as they made eye contact. Cal confidently started to speak. Clope, let's go to your hometown together. Doesn't that sound great? Clope nodded his head a few times. He looked as if he was looking at a god. Cal's hair looked white to Clope even though it was red. Cal looked toward Clope, who would die in his hometown without any emotion before leaving the underground prison. He did not have any mercy to show for people who touched the people within his territory. He started to walk up the stairs to the surface. Mary and the children, averaging 9 years old, followed behind him. Cal started to speak. Let's eat. Yes, young Master Nim? Meow. Meow sounds great. A steak for me. Mary and the children all responded back. Cal thought about the piece of steak and the glass of wine that he was going to have as he quickly started to walk. It was a walk toward a happy meal. He walked past the prison and could now see the door leading up to the surface. Cal quickly turned the doorknob. Screech, the door screeched as it opened. Beep, beep, beep. He then heard the video communication devices going off. The alarms could be heard even through the slightly opened door. Cal stopped opening the door. It sounded as if young Lady Amaru and the communications mages were standing right outside the prison door waiting for him. Should I not go out? Cal seriously considered this option before choosing to open the door. His annoyed face reappeared on the surface. Young Master Nim. It was young Lady Amaru. She seemed to be in such a hurry that she even forgot to call him Commander. Her expression showed signs of that urgency. All of them had been waiting for Cal with video communication devices in their arms. Their expression did not look good. Beep, beep, the emergency signal continued to ring. However, the royal video communication device in young Lady Amaru's arms was silent while the others were going off. The communication had not come from the Roan Kingdom's palace. Furthermore, it had not come from the Alliance either. They were coming from the extra ones they had kept with them for the what-if situations. What is it? Young Lady Amaru peeked toward Mary, who was standing behind Cal before she started to speak. Her expression was urgent and full of anger. We are getting messages from many different churches on the Western continent and all of the churches within the kingdom. Churches, temples. We are getting the most from the temples related to light, with the Church of the Sun God contacting us the most. The necromancer Mary's black robe slightly flinched. The hood of the robe turned toward Cal. Beep, beep, the reappearance of a necromancer. The reappearance of a being that used evil powers such as dead mana. The fact that they had rid the world of necromancers was a source of pride for the Church of the Sun God and the other churches associated with light. However, that cursed existence reappeared on the Roan Kingdom's battlefield. It looks like the different churches used their network churches within the Roan Kingdom to directly contact us as the Crown is not willing to take their calls. We are getting messages from all over the Western continent. The churches were using their priests in order to send all sorts of messages and video communications requests to the Northeast region's naval base. Cal reached his hand out to young Lady Amaru. She hesitated before taking out a message from her pocket and handing it over. Cal read the first sentence on the message. Amaru, the communication mages, and the other important individuals at the naval base had all seen this message. That was why they had urgently rushed over. They were waiting for Cal to speak. The black robe slowly walked up next to Cal in order to read the message. It was the moment she stopped next to Cal. Re-ip, he had ripped it up before she had the chance to read it. The ripped pieces of paper fluttered down to the ground. Ignore the bullshit. It was a simple and calm order. He started to speak again. People who ignore the person who has saved their lives are not human. Keep that in mind. Those words made Mary flinch. Cal then put his hand on her shoulder. Cal continued to speak to those who were looking at him. I don't need to tell you who our savior, the hero from the battle is, right? Mary clenched her fists underneath the black robe. Another sharp noise sounded off at that moment. Beep. Young Lady Amaru, urgently read the short message that was left in the direct communication device to the Crown in shock. It was urgent news, so they had left a short message as they could not wait until they were able to chat. She immediately started to speak. Commander Nim. The Indomitable Alliance is said to be heading toward the Karo Kingdom's shores. Cal's expression changed. Karo Kingdom. It was located underneath the Breck Kingdom and to the west of the Empire, making it the closest kingdom to the Empire. The Indomitable Alliance skipped the Breck Kingdom and its Gorge of Death and started to invade the Karo Kingdom. Based on their location, it seemed as if they had launched a fleet toward the Karo Kingdom before they had even launched a fleet for the Roan Kingdom. They seemed to be about a week's distance away from the Karo Kingdom, and according to the Breck Kingdom's information mage, the number of ships is almost impossible to count. Commander Nim? Young Lady stopped talking and looked toward Cal. Cal was smiling. Cal looked down at the message that he had ripped to shreds. He recalled who had sent this message. The Karo Kingdom was the current location with the highest influence of the Church of the Sun God. Young Lady Amaru, who could not ignore them, had given Cal that message as a representative. Cal thought about the person he had met in the Karo Kingdom's auction house while wearing a white mask. The Karo Kingdom's Church of the Sun God's bishop. It was the person who had agreed to pay 23 billion pounds while waiting for Cal to return with the Sun God's divine item. The bishop probably did not know about the Indomitable Alliance's fleet when he had sent the message. Furthermore, that person does not know of my identity. Cal turned his head to the side. He could see the black robe. Karo Kingdom. They had more than just the Church of the Sun God there. Cal thought about the people he was planning to turn into heroes. His existence would fade away once they become heroes. The Dark Elves were one of those heroes to be. They lived in the underground city because people loathed them. Their underground city was located in the Karo Kingdom. Furthermore, Mary had become a strong necromancer thanks to the Dark Elves. In addition, the fake Holy Maiden and the Half-Saint were currently in Cal's Super Rock Villa. Cal's smile became thicker. His foot stepped on the ripped-up pieces of the message. Looks like they won't need to live in hiding anymore. Excuse me? Amaru and the others did not understand what he was saying and looked toward him with confusion. However, Mary and the children averaging 9 years old clearly understood. Tap, tap. The kittens tapped Mary's black robe with their paws while Mary unclenched her fists. Cal gave an order to Amaru. Connect me to His Highness the Crown Prince. Commander's office. They had created this space for an office and strategic planning sessions. Cal was sitting at the head of the long, oval table. He sat there waiting for 2 communication mages and young Lady Amaru connect him to the Crown Prince. The communication mages peeked over at Cal multiple times. They saw his stiff expression. His stiff expression as he sat there without his usual subordinates made them continue to peek at him. Neither soldiers nor nobles were currently in this room. Is that stiff expression Commander Cal Henitus Nim's true expression? The mages could not help but peek at him, thinking that they had seen a hero's hidden appearance. However, this was the thought going through Cal's mind at that moment. I have to work without even having any time to eat. I'm supposed to be the commander. I have the highest rank here. So why am I suffering like this? Cal was very upset about this fact. Weak human, aren't you hungry? Should I give you an apple pie? It is no longer moist. He ignored the 6-year-old dragon's comments. Commander Nim, we are connected. Cal casually lifted his head up and looked toward the screen after hearing young Lady Amaru's statement. Albaru's face slowly started to appear. Amaru and the communication mages bowed toward Cal. We will be heading out now. We will take care of the rest if you let us know that the call is over. Cal and Albaru, the commander and the crown prince, were to have a private conversation. Amaru and the communication mages quietly and quickly started to leave the office once Cal nodded his head. Young Lady Amaru opened the door to head out. Click. The video communication device finished connecting at that moment. Pat, the crown prince's handsome face appeared on the screen. His voice echoed throughout the office. Our kingdom star, Cal Henitus? Amaru nodded her head as she closed the door. He's right. Young Master Cal is our kingdom's star. She needed to get out before they started discussing official business. Amaru quickly stepped through the open door. However, a statement reached her ear before she could exit. The Grand Nobles at the meeting talked about giving you a first-grade Medal of Honor. What do you think? The Grand Nobles meeting. This was the largest meeting of the Marquises and higher nobles in the Rhone Kingdom. The king or the king's representative usually attend these meetings, so Alberu now led the meeting as the king's representative. The Rhone Kingdom's first-grade Medal of Honor. It was the highest grade Medal of Honor in the Rhone Kingdom. The war was not even over yet. They had not defeated the Indomitable Alliance either. The fact that they still wanted to award him that medal showed that the Grand Nobles looked extremely favorably on the Northeast region's victory. That was why they were thinking about giving their commander, Cal, a significant reward. It was a Medal of Honor that nobody had received for the past 200 years. He would also be the youngest person to ever receive it. Starting with this Medal of Honor, Cal would grow to become an influential member of the Rhone Kingdom's nobles. Amaru and the communication mages did not realize that they were smiling. They were thinking that it was only obvious that Cal should receive this medal. Cal had the most merit during the battle, and would probably have the most merit throughout the entire war. The fact that he would receive this medal made Amaru and the communication mages cheer internally, the person that you approve of being approved by others. The joy a person gets from that was significant as well. Amaru and the communication mages looked at each other before smiling and heading out the door. They then carefully and quietly closed the door so that they would not disturb the conversation. However, they heard Cal's voice once more before they closed the door. "I do not need it, Your Highness." "Don't need it." Amaru's hand that was closing the door stopped moving. "The war is not over yet. I do not need such empty compliments." Cal really did not need it. A Medal of Honor, it would be bad if he received it. He would not be able to rest. He may even have to work for the rest of his life. That would be a terrible disaster. He didn't need it. He didn't need such an empty compliment. He also did not need land or money. He's probably the wealthiest person in the Rhone Kingdom already. He needed time to fool around and spend that money instead of receiving such a reward, and being held hostage in order to help out with the kingdom's issues. Cal could speak with a scowl as nobody other than the Crown Prince was able to see him right now. "Please just make it so I can make sure the soldiers have time to eat. Make it so that I have time to eat." That was Cal's request. Click. Young Lady Amaru closed the door with shaky hands. She then looked at the closed door before slowly removing her hand from the doorknob. She was frowning at that moment. She wiped the corners of her eyes with her hands. Cal's words echoed in her mind. How could someone be? She could see that the communication mages had the same expressions on their faces. The three observed each other's emotional expressions for a minute before starting to walk with determined expressions. Our commander is always worried about our health. Our commander does not want fame nor power. He cares more about our every meal more than things like that. Thinking about that filled them up with an unexplainable emotion. Amaru and the communication mages quickly moved to take care of their responsibilities. At that moment, Crown Prince Alberu was looking at Cal as he started to speak. "Forget the soldiers' meals. Why don't you take care of your own?" Alberu commented at Cal's pale face that looked as if he had starved for a week before stopping himself. He felt as if he would sigh. "Your Highness, I am also one of your Highness's soldiers." Cal meant what he said, but Alberu could not believe it. It'd be one thing if he wasn't so good with words. How could he be so stupid about his own health? This punk who seemed sharp and witty enough to make sure that he wasn't at a disadvantage was oddly dull about his health. No. There is no way this smart bastard is so stupid about his own body. He is probably pretending to be so dull. Alberu put on a bitter smile. War, as the Crown Prince. As the current highest commanding officer of the Rhone Kingdom, Alberu could understand why this bastard could only ignore his own health. That was why Alberu pretended not to see Cal's condition as he continued to speak. "You must have a headache from the temples contacting you." He was about to say something else. He was about to say, "I will cut off the priest's communications soon, so don't worry about it." However, Cal responded before he could do that. No, it's not that bad. He could see that Cal had now leaned back so far into the chair that he was almost laying down. He was smiling as if he had never had a stiff expression in his life. Alberu was filled with an odd sensation. It was a sense of intuition for him, and Cal started to speak as if he was responding to that intuition. The Caro kingdom is rich, right? Indeed, the Crown Prince recalled how the Indomitable Alliance was heading toward the Caro kingdom's shores. The Caro kingdom also does not have the strength to defend against the Indomitable Alliance. Indeed, the Roan kingdom was able to do so because they were prepared, and because they had Cal Henetus. The Crown Prince was fully aware of this fact. Cal's voice reached Alberu's ear at that moment. I also presume that our victory will spread throughout the continent in the next day or so. The Crown Prince could not say anything, however. Cal was not waiting for a response. He continued to speak. The Caro kingdom has many churches associated with light. Tell me more. Cal wondered if he had to say anything else. He looked toward the Crown Prince and casually commented, Your Highness, you are smiling right now. The Crown Prince was smiling. The Caro kingdom, which was rich from the auction house and the famous sightseeing landmarks, did not have the strength to fend off the Indomitable Alliance. This was the case for the temples associated with light, as well within the Caro kingdom. They would want to live as well. Then who would they reach out to? They would think about how the Roan kingdom had recently achieved victory. The Caro kingdom would definitely reach out to the Roan kingdom for help. Cal heard Rayon's voice in his head. Weak human? You are smiling even more than he is. Cal did not care about a 6-year-old's comparison. He looked toward the Crown Prince as he continued to speak. Your Highness, the Caro kingdom is weak. I assume that they will reach out to us for help. Cal nodded his head and opened up his mouth to speak, if the Caro kingdom asks them for help. At that point, Cal remembered his promise to Mary and the dark elves that he wanted to turn into heroes. He observed the Crown Prince, who probably had similar thoughts as he did. The Roan kingdom will earn an even greater strength. The trashed beings are returning to the world in order to give approval to the Roan kingdom in the kingdom and on the continental level. The trashed beings, the land of death. The dark elves lived underneath that land of death. Alberu Crossman was a quarter dark elf. He, who had to live while hiding his true appearance for all his life, could not help but scoff at Cal's comments. The trashed beings will be accepted. Those words made the human Alberu, and not the Crown Prince Alberu, get emotional. However, he had to think first as the Crown Prince and make the decisions. It would end up being a gain. The Indomitable Alliance may have lost to the Roan kingdom, but they would definitely try to win against the Caro kingdom and the Breck kingdom. They will be aiming for the Gorge of Death after the Caro kingdom. That meant that the future events would definitely be gains for the Roan kingdom. Alberu started to speak. You are a really good crazy bastard. Cal did not say anything to refute that statement. Let's try it. Those words made the Crown Prince nod his head. Cal closed his eyes and then reopened them. Weak human, are you cold? Cal was hit by the winter ocean breeze as he fell backward and laid down. He could feel the slippery back of a whale. Killer whale Archie, are we almost there? Yes, Rayon Nim. Cal peeked after hearing Rayon's question and the killer whale Archie's response. He could see the shores of the Perun Kingdom, the northernmost part of the western continent. The whales would soon destroy the Perun Kingdom's Coast Guard post. Chapter 208. You're back 3. Weak human. Are we busting things up again? Rayon fluttered his wings as he asked with excitement. Cal wrapped the scarf tightly around his neck and responded back. Probably. He could see the shore that was still frozen as it was still February. Cal observed the 5 patrol stations around the area. They were currently at the Perun Kingdom's northernmost border. Their defense against the whale tribe had once been stronger than any other location in the past. However, with the whale tribe being forgotten about now, the number of guards at this frozen shore was now dismal. Cal heard the Black Dragon's voice in his ear. Are we taking this thing too? This thing. Those words made the whales next to Cal on the small iceberg flinch. These whales were naturally the killer whale Archie and the humpback whales, Witira and Pazetin. The three of their gazes slowly turned to the side. They saw a white-haired man sitting on a wheelchair with a blank expression. The guardian knight Clope. He seemed completely out of it as he sat on the wheelchair. Cal's gaze headed toward Clope. At that moment, focus returned to Clope's gaze. Cal started to ask in a friendly tone, "Clope, you'll go with us, right?" Archie flinched at Cal's friendly demeanor before almost falling over after seeing Clope's response. Clope raised his limp arms to the air. He then clasped his hands together and bowed deeply toward Cal while still sitting on his wheelchair. It looked as if he was bowing to a god. What is going on here? Archie's gaze headed toward the half-blooded whale, Pazetin. However, Pazetin had no information as well. Pazetin shook his head with a confused expression. They heard Cal continuing to speak to Clope. "You know what you have to do, right?" "I will do as you command." Archie's expression turned odd, but Cal did not care as he observed the fear in Clope's eyes and turned away. Choi Han had cut off Clope's arm. Ron had cut off his other arm, and his 2 legs were turned into minced meat. However, all of his limbs looked normal right now. He had his legs back even though they did not move, while his 2 arms at least moved slowly. Witira started to speak. "Young Master Cal, everything's okay, right?" She was not asking about Clope's condition. She was not the type to feel sympathy for the enemy. She was just asking to see if this plan would progress smoothly. "Don't worry." Witira did not ask anymore after hearing Cal's confident response. "It would be fine if he said that it will be fine." Cal turned away from Clope and snorted. Cal knew that Clope was looking at him like a god. There's no way it's real. He was thinking that Clope was acting this way out of fear. Why? The necromancer, Mary, was the one who had made his legs and arms for him. Cal had told her to recreate his limbs while telling her to do something else as well. The new limbs are bombs. Mary instantly understood what he wanted. "You just need me to put dead mana in there." Dead mana was a deadly poison for the living. Even the sword master Hannah only survived thanks to Mary's help. That poisonous power was currently in all 4 of Clope's limbs. Cal recalled what Mary had told him. "All of his limbs will explode once I send the signal or if someone tries to heal him. He will die right away once that happens." Clope's life was in Cal's hands. He would do anything in order to stay alive. That was the reason that Cal could look at Clope and snort. This was the guy who had tricked the continent into thinking that he was the Wyvern Knight. What wouldn't such a person be willing to do to save his life? Cal would never trust his enemy and had no plan to let go of this weakness that he held in his hands. The black dragon Rayon peeked at Cal and Clope before flying over to Witira. He then quietly whispered to her, "That white-haired guy is a bit crazy, but he can still play his part." "I understand, Dragon Nim." Witira finally let go of her concerns about Clope. With both Cal and Rayon saying it was okay, there was no reason for her to worry. However, Witira did not know the full extent. "He's a bit crazy." She didn't know what Rayon really meant by that. The 6-year-old Rayon sighed while seeing that Clope was still looking at Cal's back. Clope continued to look at Cal's back. Cal's red hair looked white to him. The guardian knight still had not forgotten about the legend. He recalled the voice of the necromancer who created these bomb-infused limbs on his body. The voice that was so cold that he questioned whether she was truly a human spoke in a monotone voice. You cannot get in the young Master Nim's way. Of course, there was actually a good amount of emotion in comparison to Mary's normal voice. However, it was so faint that only those close to her would be able to notice it. The young Master Nim is an amazing person. Mary informed the guardian knight about Cal in a mechanical voice. To Mary, Cal was someone she was thankful for. He was someone who was pitiable and good, always doing things for other people. Chatter, chatter. She shared her honest thoughts about Cal. She said it in an innocent way because she was an innocent person. That person is always looking at everything. He was meticulously caressing all of his group's pains. He may come off as indifferent, but it was always done in a gentle way. His heart seemed to be as tall as a mountain. He had healed Mary's pain that way as well. However, Clope heard her words differently. That person is always looking at everything. The moment he heard his words, Clope felt as if his mind had cleared. That person really does know everything. That is why he appeared in front of me. The image of the red hair turning white was still on his mind. Clope thought about the legend. The real legend, and not the one that the Seca household had fabricated. This was the truth. Then that god that went to the south, Clope's heart started to beat wildly. At that moment, he heard the voice again, which cleared up his mind. Only Mary's voice could be heard inside of the prison. That person never strays from the good and always works for justice. Clope realized something. That is why it had to be this way. In the end, the world moves according to his will. Mary was just complimenting Cal on preparing for the war in advance and doing what he could to protect everyone. However, Clope understood that compliment differently. In fact, Clope misunderstood it in a significantly exaggerated manner. Cal did not know of this as he got up from his seat. "Let's go." Splash. The winter ocean was causing rough waves, the ocean underneath the iceberg. The water was dyed darker than usual. It was because of the whales. Large whales were slowly approaching the Perun Kingdom's shores. Ugh, why is it so cold today? Seriously. The Perun Kingdom's northern shores. A soldier at the central patrol station handed the grumbling mage a cup of warm tea. The communication mage took a sip of the tea before pushing it off to the side. Ah, much better. Why do we need to guard this place when nobody is going to invade from this direction? I agree. There is no way a southern kingdom would be able to break through the ice here. The south may be busy with the war, however. This northern patrol station did not need to worry about that. Who would really invade through here? The mage leaned on the chair and looked out to the ocean outside the window. He could see the water moving in the distance, however. The area near the patrol station was completely frozen. It was a completely useless point of entry. Who would come through here? Is the next check-in in an hour? Yes, sir? This damn life. The mage sighed at his unfortunate situation of having to pass time without the chance to gain any merits. However, he still had to do his job properly. They were in a time of war. There were the Central Forces who were focused on checking in more than ever. The Central Forces. The Seca household's current head, Duke Rock Seca. He was leading the Central Forces. He put a lot of emphasis on information and security to the point that he created his office as the Central Information Communication Room to use with the communication mages. "Sigh, we can't make a generic report because the Duke Nim is listening in." The mage let out a sigh. Since Duke Rock Seca would be there was no way that he could give a mediocre report. I agree. The only thing we would be able to report is if the whale tribe comes to attack. Ha! The mage let out a scoff at the soldier's comment. The whale tribe. You're thinking about a tribe that has been long forgotten about, but there is no way something like that would happen. Why would that quiet tribe come to invade us? We haven't done anything wrong to them. That's true. I thought so myself after saying that. The soldier awkwardly nodded his head. Even he thought that something like that would never happen. The soldier who had grown up by the shore had heard stories about the whale tribe from his grandfather, however. They were just a mysterious existence from folklore. The soldier flinched after looking out the window at that moment. Mage Nim? What is it? The mage who was drinking tea looked up at the soldier with a grumpy expression. However, the soldier's gaze did not move away from the window. What is it? The mage sounded annoyed as he looked out the window as well. The soldier was pointing to something in the distance. What is that in the ocean? There was a spray of water shooting up into the air in the distance. The ocean that had been gray was now completely black. He could also see waves. No, they were not waves. Large beings were pushing forward across the ocean. The mage's shocked voice could be heard as well. The soldier who realized what they were shouted in almost a shriek. Whales. Mage Nim, they are definitely whales. Bang, the soldier could not finish his sentence. The patrol station was shaking. Something was slamming onto the ice from the bottom. Boom, boom. The mage subconsciously took a step back. Something was coming up from the bottom of the ocean from underneath the ice. Bang, bang, more cracks appeared on the ice with every bang. The soldier grabbed onto the mage and continued to shout. Whales, it's the whale tribe, Mage Nim. It was the moment he said that. Bang, A bang that was louder than any other previous bangs could be heard as the ice on the water cracked completely. The frozen ice cracked away as a large whale appeared. It was a humpback whale with an X-shaped scar on her back. This large whale's body rose above the water. The soldier and mage made eye contact with the humpback whale. They felt their whole body freezing up after seeing the cold gaze in the whale's eyes. The humpback whale's large tail moved at that moment. The tail that looked as if it was going to strike the heavens headed back down. Bang! It then slammed down in order to get rid of the ice. That was the beginning. The whales surrounded the patrol stations. They then started to proceed to break up the ice frozen above the ocean. The power to break through nature, this berserk and brutal strength was overwhelming. This, just what? Mage Nim, we must hurry up and send a message. We must let the others know that the whales have invaded. The soldier urgently shouted, and the mage finally managed to come back to his senses. The invasion of the whales. The mage felt fear from these forgotten existences. They were destroying the ocean. The whale tribe was known as the rulers of the ocean. His hand was shaking as he urgently grabbed onto the video communication device. A loud noise could be heard at that moment. Bang! The soldier reported the situation. The Eastern Patrol Station was destroyed. The mage poured mana into the video communication device and nodded his head. He could see the Eastern Patrol Station being destroyed with his own eyes. At the same time, he could see vapor rising around the humpback whale with the X-shaped scar. And then, once the vapor disappeared, flick. A female whale beast person appeared while flicking a long water whip. This whip made of water was moving around and breaking up the ice. The humpback whale beast person stepped on pieces of broken ice as she made a beeline for the Central Patrol Station. She was far away, but the mage was certain about something. That whale is looking at him. Fear filled his body. Crackle, crackle. The sound of the video communication device connecting could be heard. The mage quickly lowered his head and looked into the video communication device. It is not time to check in. What is going on? He could hear the voice of the communication mage of the Central Forces on the other end. The mage urgently started to shout. The whale tribe has invaded? What are you talking about? The unexpected report made the mage think that he had heard incorrectly. The whale tribe has come. The whale tribe is causing a ruckus in the ocean. The mage was scared. He thought that he might die. That thought made him shout loud enough for the video communication device to break. His voice that was full of despair turned the information communication room into chaos. One person responded to the shout. What are you talking about, Duke Rock Seka? Clope Seka's father and the person known by the Perun Kingdom as the Guardian Knight. He appeared on the screen. The mage spoke with even more urgency after seeing his face. The whale tribe has invaded, and they are destroying the ice. The mage then turned the screen toward the ocean. The already destroyed patrol stations, the patrol stations currently being destroyed, and the mess that was the ocean could be seen. When did the attack start? What is the current situation? He could hear the urgency in Duke Rock's voice as well. However, the fact that he was still composed made the mage calm down as he responded back. The attack started 5 minutes ago. The Eastern Patrol Station is destroyed, while the others are under attack as well. As for our Central Patrol Station, the mage stopped talking. Huh. He noticed the weirdness outside the window. What happened to the whale? What happened to the whale that was heading toward us? He could not see the humpback whale beast person. What is it? Why aren't you saying anything? The mage could not continue speaking. He realized something else at that moment. The soldier that was next to him was quiet. Why is he being quiet? Plop. He saw the soldier fall down by his foot. He seemed to have fainted without a single injury. The mage's eyes slowly started to turn. He had seen the blue-haired woman who had been heading toward their patrol station. This whale had blue hair similar to her hair, however. It was a man this time. The mage could not do anything even though he saw the blue-haired man's hand heading toward his back. Plop. The mage was easily knocked unconscious by the half-blood whale Pazetin's hands. Tang, tang. The video communication device fell to the floor. What is going on? Are you unable to make a report? Duke Rock's voice could be heard from the still-connected video communication device. A person picked up the video communication device, Cal Hennetus. He passed the video communication device to someone else. Here. Clope received the video communication device from Cal with shaking hands. Duke Rock continued to speak while the screen was shaking. Communication mage. Are you unable to continue the video? What is the number of wails? Urgency and a sense of emergency seemed to be in Duke Rock's voice, however. Cal was completely calm on the other side. You remember my order? Clope's pupils shook after hearing Cal's voice. Cal's order. Make the Perun Kingdom become our spy. Cal pushed down on Clope's shoulder as he pointed toward the video communication device. It was him telling Clope to do as he was ordered. He'll do it if he doesn't want to die. Cal quietly observed Clope, whom he thought would pick his life above all else. Clope's hands were shaking as he turned the screen toward his face. What is going on? Duke Rock Seca flinched. He could see white hair. He became at a loss for words after seeing hair as white as his own. My son, Clope Seca. It was recorded that his son was missing in action after the battle against the Roan Kingdom a few days ago. Duke Rock could not understand what was going on. However, as someone from a quick-witted household, he raised his hand and motioned to the mages. Security Level 1. The people inside the information communication room quietly started to proceed according to his signal. The Duke did not look at them as he continued to look at his son. It was at that moment. Hello there. The Duke saw someone else through the screen. You are. The Duke was familiar with this person. He was the reason that their plan to take down the Roan Kingdom had failed. The red-haired man. He could see Cal Hennetus on the other side. He was smiling brightly with a hand on Clope's shoulder. Duke Rock Seca looked as if he had seen something that was hard to understand. The Whale tribe at the northern border with his son and Cal Hennetus. What the hell was going on? Rock's pupils started to shake at that moment. Father. His son Clope was smiling brightly. Cal quietly observed him from the side. Clope would follow his order in order to survive. Since the Roan Kingdom seemed stronger than the Indomitable Alliance, he would want to stick with Cal in order to protect his household. Cal confirmed that in his mind as he looked toward Clope. God. Cal flinched. Clope responded brightly to his father. This esteemed sir is a god. What the hell? Cal looked toward Clope with true disbelief. Clope spoke with an expression that seemed to be saying that he had achieved his dream. Father, I have escorted the legend here. Did he really go crazy? Cal was at a loss for words. Chapter 209. You're back 4. He's really lost it. Cal could not say anything in response to the 6-year-old dragon's sighing tone. He saw the odd way Pazetin was looking at him, as well as the stiff steps of Witira and Archie who just walked into the patrol station. But he could not show any response. The killer whale Archie especially looked shocked. Wow, damn, what what amazing thing you did again. Archie quickly changed his words to those of a compliment as he looked toward Clope. The killer whale Archie could not help but close his mouth after hearing Clope's next words. This esteemed sir's words are all correct, and he knows about everything. We can go down the right path if we follow this, sir. Archie could not believe the way Clope was praising Cal. However, the thing that shocked him even more was the truth behind those words. It's actually true. Clope's words were actually true. Although that nuance was a bit different, hasn't young Master Cal always been a step ahead of everyone in order to do the right thing? I guess it's true. The killer whale Archie saw Witira nodding her head and shut up. Witira was smiling with an entertained expression on her face. What a scary human. The killer whale Archie was thinking that Cal was scarier than the whale King Schickler who had beaten him to a pulp. He then pretended not to see anything, although his pupils were still shaking. However, there was someone here who could not ignore what was going on. What the Guardian Knight's father. Rock Seca, the head of the Seca household. He could not comprehend what was going on right now. God legend. He was aware of how his son was always obsessed about legends. However, that was because he himself wanted to become one. not because he wanted to serve someone else. Duke Rock's gaze headed toward Cal Hennetus. Cal had been making an odd expression while looking at Clope all this time. However, the shock on his face had disappeared after a few moments. New thoughts filled his mind instead. Oh, how interesting. Contrary to Cal's mind that was moving quickly, a shocked voice filled the patrol station. Captain Clope Seca, what nonsense are you spewing right now? The Duke called him captain instead of son in order to try to make him come to his sense. Cal wanted to applaud the Duke, who was somehow able to maintain his calm. Even he had been shocked, so how shocked must the Duke have been? His mind was probably complicated right now, thinking about whether his son had gone crazy or if he was being threatened. Do I need to step in? Cal was debating whether he needed to step in to steer this in the right direction. Clope started to speak at that moment. Duke Nim. His voice sounded normal. Just 3 days. Clope was rationally thinking that Cal was a legendary figure. He had simulated many different scenarios in his head while in the underground prison. The necromancer had shared how they were able to achieve an overwhelming victory out in the ocean with innocent purity. That was why he was able to come to his own conclusions. 3 days. The Duke responded to his son while sending many signals to the mages. This conversation could not go out of this room. It definitely could not be sent to the Indomitable Alliance. The Perun Kingdom's influence in the Indomitable Alliance had been falling because Clope Seca was captured, and the arm member who had been controlling the wyverns was missing in action. The Bear Tribe and the Dwarves, as well as the Norland Kingdom and the Askasan Kingdom, which both had a navy, had more influence. Why is the Roan Kingdom invading at a time like this? The Duke felt a headache as things were not going well. It was okay because the Perun Kingdom had a larger than average number of soldiers and knights. Otherwise, their influence would be even smaller. Duke Rock was about to sigh. It was at that moment. Yes, 3 days. That is how long it would take for the Roan Kingdom to conquer the Perun Kingdom's capital. Both Cal and Duke Rock flinched. Clope confidently started to speak about the forces that could not help but become legends. Adding on the Whale Tribe, they can take down the Perun Kingdom in just hours if they really wanted to do so. Clope slowly continued to speak. This sir has enough forces to decimate the remaining wyverns. And they may have been at the lowest level of strength, but all 3 of Arm's red stars have been captured. Clope believed that he was still perfectly sane. He also has the strength to instantly destroy 300 ships at once. He had thought about it and had come to a conclusion he was certain about. He has a sword master, a necromancer, and many sword experts. There are also other people at about the Whale Tribe's level of strength protecting this, sir. Clope had not gone crazy. He was just moving in the best way for him to maintain his life. Father, no, Duke Nim. Clope was also a sword master. He had started this war to become a legend. He, too, was someone who had spent hours to reach the apex of the way of the sword. That was why he could see it. I wish to live. The future that Clope simulated was explained to his father. The Indomitable Alliance will not be able to take any of the southern lands. Duke Rock could see the certainty in his son's eyes. The originally blank eyes of his son were now sparkling. This was the eyes of the Seca household, the eyes of the white snake that never missed the opportunity to find a way to live. Clope did not hide this gaze from Cal. We must follow this esteemed sir. The snake wanted to follow the legend even if it was at the coattails. Then we will at least be able to follow the path of a legend. The Hennetus territory was a small territory in an average kingdom. It would be the story of how Cal started from such a territory and shook up the entire continent. Wasn't that the perfect start that was similar to the heroes of legends? Clope spoke to his father and the Perun Kingdom behind him. Duke Nim, at least we need to survive. They could get rid of the Indomitable Alliance in order to survive. Duke Rock subconsciously gulped. His son Clope Seca had accepted Arm's help, saying that he would become a sword master and create a legend. Although Arm was now the center of the alliance, the original Northern Alliance was focused around his son. The look in his son's eyes right now looked even more determined when he had told the alliance that they should head for the southern lands. An unknown source of uncertainty started to fill the Duke's complicated mind. All right, now then. Cal Hennetus, the man who had been standing there with a hand on his son's shoulder, looked toward Duke Rock and continued to speak. It was a very official tone of voice. I will now teach you how you can survive. However, the words he was saying were things he should not be confident about. Cal patted Clope on the shoulder as he explained himself. It will allow the Perun kingdom to not fall and to continue to be the strongest power in the western continent's northern region after the war. Duke Rock was focused on how they will continue to be the strongest power in the northern region. How could there be such a method? Just what if you wish to know? Duke Rock looked toward Cal, who had cut him off. He did not seem to have any hesitation even while addressing a duke like himself. He just had a look that seemed ready to take care of business. Please come on over. I do not enjoy chatting while standing up. Cal Hennetus was telling Duke Rock Seka to come to him. However, it was more of a threat than a request. Duke Rock could see the destroyed patrol stations through the window behind Cal. Cal's relaxed voice reached his ears at that moment. Ah, by the way, if more than 5 people show up, we will take that as a declaration of war and immediately start our attack. The whale tribe will probably destroy the entire coastline. Duke Rock could see Cal's gentle smile. Cal Hennetus gave off a serious vibe of a noble as he opened up his hand, since it should be possible for you to teleport. He opened his hand to show 5 fingers. 5 minutes. Bring 5 people in the next 5 minutes. It was his way of saying he would not give them any time to think. Forget a god. Cal seemed more like the devil in the Duke's eyes. The devil continued to speak. Let the Alliance know if you want. Nothing will change for the Perun kingdom or the Seka household either way. Of course, I will take it as you are rejecting our offer. It was the truth. Would the indomitable alliance that was heading south turn back to help the Perun kingdom that had neither wyverns nor a sword master anymore? Cal's voice reached the Duke's ear once again. 1 minute has passed. He then ended the call. Duke Rock closed his eyes for a moment. Hurry up and get it prepared. He quickly shouted an order as he reopened his eyes. Screech. The door to the old communication room in the central patrol station opened. Duke Rock Seka had his subordinates standing behind him as he observed the situation behind the open door. Welcome. There was a man sitting on a chair with his legs crossed and drinking tea. Cal welcomed the Duke, who was standing by the door as if he was frozen. The Duke could see his son sitting on a wheelchair while drinking tea. He could also see the people he presumed were the whales. Duke Rock Seka, who was both a duke and a father, subconsciously started to speak. Clope. However, Duke Rock could only hear Cal's voice. I will create a new legend for the Perun kingdom like your son wants. The Duke's movement stopped. Clope's expression changed as well. The teacup in Clope's hand was shaking. Duke Rock's gaze focused on Cal after seeing this reaction. He could see that Cal was smiling. 3 things? Cal gave the Duke some proposals. I will request 3 things for you. I will also tell you 3 truths. Their conversation and their deal start with those words. Cal shared his 3 conditions. He then told the Duke the 3 truths for those conditions. It did not take long to say all of those things. Just 1 hour. Although the tea in their cups were now cold, it was just a short amount of time. Cal and Duke Rock's conversation ended after that time. He stood up from his seat and ended the conversation. You have 1 week to prepare. Cal did not say anything else before turning away from Duke Rock. 1 week. Duke Rock could see the vicious gazes of the whales still in the ocean. 1 week. Although he had been given some time, some of the whales stayed behind. The whales' movements will be determined based on Cal's decisions in a week. Duke Rock could not leave the patrol station for a long time. On the other hand, Cal needed to receive Rayon's questions after leaving the patrol station. Weak human, why did you give him time to prepare? Is there something happening in this week? Cal laid down on Archie's back as he answered back. Just a bit of the world turning chaotic. Yes, yes indeed. How could they not be shocked after seeing dark elves revealing themselves for the first time in hundreds of years? Cal imagined that scenario as he casually answered, however. Someone understood this a bit differently. The large killer whale's back twitched as he started to sweat. Rayon did not care as he responded to Cal. Ah, I see. the black dragon casually answered before laying down next to Cal. Archie was swimming faster than he had ever swam before in his entire whale life. Human. We got a call from the Crown Prince? Rayon approached Cal with a video communication device shining red in his arms. Bedroom. This was somewhere that only the children averaging 9 years old and Ron were with him. Connect it. Rayon connected the call and moved to a corner of the room with On and Hong. The children averaging 9 years old had sauce on their mouths. Pat. The video communication device was connected, and Alberu's handsome face appeared. Young Master Cal Hennetus, the star of our kingdom, are you eating meat? Yes, your highness. Cal put a piece of beef steak in his mouth and nodded his head. S-H-H-H-H. The wine cup next to Cal was being filled with red wine. Cal picked up the cup that Ron handed over and took a sip. He then started to speak. I'm sorry, your highness. I am hungry as I just returned from the Perun kingdom. That is why I am eating right now. I apologize for picking up your call like this. Cal responded back with whatever came to his mind. He expected Alberu to say, crazy bastard, or you're driving me nuts before getting down to business. He then stabbed a piece of steak with his fork. Although Alberu may say things like that, he was not the type to complain about his eating. However, Cal felt that something was off today. He held the fork with the meat in his hand as he looked back toward the video communication device. The Crown Prince was smiling brightly. Yes, you should eat when you are hungry. Our young Master Cal should definitely eat when he is hungry. This is weird. Cal was thinking this was very weird. He then realized the reason for this feeling. Agu, is one plate of steak enough? Even a fancy table full of food would not be enough for our young Master Cal. Why is he like this? Cal felt something from what the Crown Prince was doing, a glib tongue. Cal started to frown. That change made Alberu's eyes shake for a moment, but he continued to smile brightly as he spoke. Yes, I should treat our young Master Cal to a delicious, the best meal the royal kitchen can make. Don't you agree? Steak and wine are not enough. Cal's blunt voice responded back. Do I need to go to the capital? The Crown Prince put away his bright smile, seeing that Cal understood what he needed as usual, and continued to speak with his usual expression. I called to discuss something with you. The Crown Prince was aware that Cal was his partner in this war. That was why he delivered honest information about what was going on at the capital. He thought that was the respectful thing to do. In the end, the Caro Kingdom is seeing help from us and the Empire. They seem to have gotten scared after hearing about the Indomitable Alliance's ships. Cal realized something after seeing the Crown Prince's calm expression, and this problem is difficult for the Crown to handle on its own. The Roan Kingdom was still at war. It would be hard to defend their own kingdom while helping out the Caro Kingdom as well. Do it wrong, and the nobles could spread rumors to the citizens that the kingdom has thrown away its own citizens to help foreign kingdoms for benefits. Cal took another sip of wine. His face started to flush red. Are the nobles against helping the Caro Kingdom? There are always people who oppose things. However, Marquis Alan made the atmosphere weird. Marquis Alan. His family was known as the Roan Kingdom's greatest martial arts household. Cal felt an odd sensation. The Crown Prince continued to gently speak. I wish to hear your opinion. Cal brushed his eyes with his hands. Marquis Alan's faction and the Central Noble faction want to officially hold a Grand Nobles meeting to hear your opinion. The Northeast region with the Hennetus household. The Stan household with the formerly pushed-aside firstborn, Taylor Stan. The Jaira household with Antonio that guards the southwest region that borders the Empire. There were factions in the southeast region and the central region as well. They said it would be best to listen to the thoughts of our northeast region's commander Nim that is protecting our Roan Kingdom. The nobles wanted confirmation that the Roan Kingdom would continue to be safe, and that it was okay to assist the Caro Kingdom. They did not want to hear this from the Crown Prince, but the person who had achieved victory in the war. This was to Cal's expectations as well. That was why he had prepared documents and was ready to chat through a video communication device. However, the problem was that it was not such an innocent request. Whether it was because they were wary or because it was out of their goodwill, Some of the nobles wanted to see this upcoming power for themselves. It was the actions of people who did not want to lose power even during a war. Cal slowly started to speak. What bullshit by the southeast region and the central region. Indeed, but they aren't wrong. It is still annoying. Cal could see the Crown Prince's face. He could sense the annoyance in his face. The Crown Prince would not be annoyed like this if they were calling Cal over, because they were truly worried about the kingdom, and not because of this faction's battle. In some aspects, it made sense to listen to the opinion of the Northeast region's military commander. However, their intentions were not good. Tap, tap, tap. Cal tapped his finger on the table. They also want the Sword Master and the Necromancer to accompany you. They claim it is to praise their abilities. Tap, tap. The finger that was tapping on the table stopped. They probably did not have good intentions for wanting to see Choi Han and Mary either. That was why the Crown Prince had called Cal. However, I will take care of that, so do not worry about it. You can ignore all useless calls from the central region. That is okay. The Crown Prince flinched before starting to smile. He understood Cal's intentions by looking at the expression on his face. You really do have a tendency to take good care of your subordinates. The look of annoyance that was on Cal's face had changed to something else. The Crown Prince looked at the cold gaze in Cal's face as he added on, "The citizens of the capital wish to see you as well. The most popular weapon they are selling in the capital is apparently the shield right now." Hey, Cal let out a deep sigh. However, that sigh soon turned into a smile. It was time to show the citizens a new hero. I guess I need to cause a ruckus at the capital first. The capital? The Crown Prince looked toward Cal, who had decided to come to the capital, before adding on, "The entire kingdom will become chaotic." However, he didn't know whether it will be because of people cheering or because of people fearing. Chapter 210. Now do you get it? 1. Click. The door opened with a quiet noise, and Cal could see inside the office. "Commander Nim, you're here." He could see the long, oval table in the office. All of the people sitting at the table got up to greet Cal. The Ubar Liege, the Knight Captain of the 1st Knights Brigade, Mage Captain Tasha, young lady who was responsible for the video communication devices and record-keeping, as well as many others who were the core of the Northeast region's naval base, were in the office. Their expressions did not look good. They lightly lowered their heads as Cal motioned to them with his eyes as he headed toward the head of the table. "Commander Nim, did you eat? Did you get to eat, Commander Nim? What the?" Cal felt odd after hearing people greeting him like this with serious expressions. Why are they caring about my meal so much? Is this the new trend these days? Cal casually nodded his head and sat down at the head of the table. The Ubar Liege started to speak as soon as he sat down. "Commander Nim, will you be going to the capital?" The question made the atmosphere in the room become sullen. They had received the message at the naval base this morning. It indicated that they were requesting Commander Cal Henetus's presence at the Grand Nobles meeting. That was why the naval base was chaotic since the morning. "Yes, I am going." Cal's confident response made them not ask any questions. Commander Cal Henetus, he was an extremely smart person. They didn't know how to refute a decision made by such a person. The Mage Captain, Dark Elf Tasha, hid her head inside her robe to hide her annoyed expression. These nobles, however, before she could even finish her thought, someone started to speak. "All these noble bastards always do the same thing." Gasp. Tasha gasped internally. She then turned her head to the side. The captain of the 1st Knights Brigade, that stoic human, was sitting there with a stoic expression as if he had not said anything. He responded stiffly after seeing the eyes fall on him. "Ah, of course, the proper nobles are exceptions. I'm talking about the noble bastards who care so much about their factions." Wow, Tasha was amazed to hear these words that she had wanted to say as well. The fact that the Knight Captain had no issues saying these things meant that he considered everyone here, especially Cal, as being on his side. The Knight Captain closed his mouth as if he had not said anything at all. Other people started to speak after he had opened up the floodgates. The war is not over, and the Northeast region's naval base is still busy with the cleanup. How can they order our Commander Nim to come and go as they please? These fools who don't know how cruel and scary war is just sit there and try to boss him around. They are probably trying to suppress you, Commander Nim, one of them shouted in anger. And they are not just calling you Commander Nim. They are calling Choi Han Nim and the Necromancer Nim as well. Just what tap? Cal's palm lightly tapped on the table. The person who was talking looked toward Cal before shutting his mouth. A calm voice started to speak. That is why I am going. The people around the table remained quiet. Cal was not showing anger, annoyance, or any emotion at that. However, the fact that he was showing no emotion made the people at the naval base know what he was thinking. Cal continued to speak to those who were looking at him. They will not be calling people from our naval base in the future. Amaru, who was in charge of records, hesitated for a moment before her hand quickly resumed taking notes. People from our naval base. She knew the reason Cal was quietly going to the capital this time. It was not because he was angry at the nobles or because he was afraid of their suppression. Amaru and the others were thinking that the nobles may call people from the naval base in the future as well. In fact, this might be the start of them demanding more of them to show up in the future. It wouldn't be as bad for the Northeast region's nobles, but the ones with lower titles were bound to be dragged around left and right. It was highly likely that they would be bait in the chaotic fight for power. That was why they were worried. However, their commander spoke in a confident voice to instantly rid them of this concern. Of course, I will make sure to get some information and our reward. Amaru clenched the pen in her hand. This person truly was always a step ahead of others and shocked people. She let out a deep sigh before moving her pen again. She heard Cal's voice again at that moment, making her raise her head to look at him. The reason I gathered all of you here was to let you know about the fact that I am going to the capital. However, there is also another reason. Cal wouldn't have gathered them here for no reason. It was easy to move around because he could teleport. However, it was difficult for him to always be at the naval base in the future, while I am gone. He made eye contact with each of them before continuing to speak. I trust that the Roan Kingdom shores will be safe. The room was quiet. The only person who had been talking asked the others. Well, Amaru started to speak to respond to his question. However, there was someone who was one step ahead of her. The night captain started to speak. You can trust us? Good. Cal gently smiled back. They have enough strength here to take care of things. I can take a relaxing trip. Cal started to smile, thinking that he had one less baggage to carry with him. However, the others could not smile back at him, which each of them doing their own things to resolve themselves. Let's protect this place until our Commander Nim gets back. That thought was on all of their minds. Of course, Cal did not know it would be to this extent. Then let's end this meeting here. I feel like I called you all here for no reason since there wasn't much to discuss. Cal ended the meeting as there was nothing to discuss. However, this meeting was one that the people in the office with him would not forget. Cal watched everyone bow and leave before sitting down on the couch in the office. He then waited for new people to arrive. Screech. The door opened slowly a bit later and two people entered. It was Choi Han and Mary. Sit. Cal pointed to the couch across him. Since they were going to go with him this time, it was important to keep them in the loop. Cal Nim, did you eat? I guess it really is a new trend these days. Cal casually responded to Choi Han's greeting. No, not yet. The mechanical voice chimed in at that moment. Young Master Nim, you must eat to be healthy. The only time you don't have to eat is when you are dead. Why is she saying such vicious things? Cal nodded toward the black robe with a blank expression. Only then did Mary quiet down. There was a story running rampant throughout the naval base right now. The story was naturally one that a loud-mouth communication mage who was full of admiration had shared with the others about Cal's comment regarding the soldiers' meals. But there was no way Cal would know about this. That was why Cal pushed aside this new trendy way to greet people before trying to get down to business. However, Choi Han was a bit faster. I heard that you are going to the capital, Cal Nim. Us as well. Choi Han gulped after seeing Cal nodding his head. Amaru and the night captain had explained the purpose of going to the capital. The night captain, who had gotten slightly closer to Choi Han due to their shared choice of weapon, had told him with a serious expression on his face. The noble bastards are probably gathering in the meeting room and plan on making Commander Nim stand in the center while trying to drag him to the ground. Those bastards have nothing other than their titles and enjoy doing such things to people. They tried to do the same to me when I went to report about the Knights Brigade at year-end. Choi Han and Mary, who had heard this, imagined Cal being surrounded by people and being questioned. The Knight Captain had said something else. I heard Choi Han Nim and Mary Nim are going as well. You will face that together. It will be difficult, but just let it in one ear and out the other. Choi Han thought about the Knight Captain's suggestion and started to speak. Will we be standing in front of the nobles as well? How should I act in such a situation? Mary clenched her fists underneath her robe and looked toward Cal. The two of them were waiting for Cal to speak. What is it? Excuse me? Cal was looking at Choi Han in a way that seemed to be asking what he was talking about, and Choi Han blankly answered back. Cal started to frown after seeing that blank expression. It is more uncomfortable if I have the two of them with me. He was plotting something with the Crown Prince. What good would the terrible actor Choi Han and the innocent Mary do for that? Maybe B. Crocs or Ron might be helpful, but these two were more likely to be hindrances. You two don't need to go to such a place. I alone am enough. Yes, yes, indeed. It was definitely plenty, since the Crown Prince would be there as well. There were also many people to use in that gathering as well. Cal continued to speak to the two people who remained quiet. Of course, there may be times in the future where you will need to be in front of the citizens for parades or whatnot. Those are the places you need to be at. Since they are going to be heroes, he was planning on letting them be seen by the citizens so that they could replace him and become true heroes. Cal started to smile, thinking about how people would forget about him. He heard Choi Han's voice at that moment. Are you saying we should be present for things that will be full of cheering? Well, something like that. Just be advised that the cheering might be quite loud. Choi Han started to frown. Mary clenched onto the sleeve of her robe. Choi Han hesitated a few times before finally starting to speak. We want to follow you to the Grand Nobles meeting. We want to go, Mary added on. However, the two did not expect much even as they asked. The Cal Henitus that they knew was a stubborn person. No. He was someone who kept his word, and someone who did not change his mind once he made up his mind to sacrifice himself for others. Choi Han started to speak. Then I will be waiting outside the meeting room door. I want to do that as well. Cal casually nodded his head. It should be fine at the entrance, since they will not influence what happens inside. Weak human, I will follow you inside. An invisible dragon should be fine, he thought. Cal opened his mouth to answer all of them at once. Whatever you want. The eyes of all three individuals sparkled. However, Cal did not care about it as he finished his preparations and left for the capital with Choi Han, Mary, and Rayon, the only wooden building in the Roan Kingdom. This was the hall for the Grand Nobles meeting. The hall was configured with seats in a circle, and it had been many years since this large number of nobles were present. The circular seats were divided into 5 sections. 4 of them were centered around the head of each faction. The Central Region's Duke Orsina. The Northwest Region's Marquis Stan. The Southeast Region's Marquis Alan. The Southwest Region's Duchess Jaira. One of those individuals, Marquis Alan, who was the head of the household known for being the greatest martial arts family in the Roan Kingdom, was already present. He quietly looked down at the circular hall. Marquis Nim. One noble approached him and started to speak. His voice was full of scorn. It looks like the Jaira household has moved as well. The noble looked toward Duchess Sonata, who was at the center of the Southwest Region's faction members. The old Duchess was sitting there with her mouth closed. Although she had said she was handing the position over to her grandson, it did not seem to have happened yet. She claimed to lock the gates after the slave trade was discovered, but still showed up here in the face of benefits. This was the reason for the scorn in the noble's eyes. Although it was hush-hush, many of the nobles knew about the Jaira household's vassals' involvement in the slave trade. That was why they had all mocked the Duchess when she said she was going to lock the gates with her tail tucked between her legs. However, Duchess Jaira had shown up to be involved in the central politics again. Another noble interjected into the conversation this noble was having with Marquis Ainz. Would she want to relinquish this chance to earn another source of strength? They probably could not sit still knowing this war will be the door to the emergence of a new power. The noble continued to speak. Look, even the new head of the Stan household who had been quiet is here at this grand nobles' meeting. The man he was pointing to looked gentle and weak. Although he had once lost the position, Taylor Stan had returned to take control of the household. He was sitting in a side with the Northwest region's nobles. All of the Central faction's nobles are here as well. It's been a while since we've all gathered together like this. The noble, whose face was full of greed, almost whispered to Marquis Ainz. We must take control of the Northeast region at all costs this time. We absolutely must suppress that commander. We need to do it now before he gains more strength. The noble said that as he observed Marquis Ainz's expression. It was stoic as usual. That made the noble relieved. The Marquis started to speak at that moment. It doesn't look like anybody is coming from the Northeast region. All of the factions had gathered together. There was a visibly empty region in this circular room. Those were the seats of the Northeast region's nobles who were not here. None of the Northeast region nobles had shown up at the Grand Nobles meeting. However, the noble was not fazed by this. Do not worry about it, Marquis Ainz. I was able to speak to the Northeast region's nobles associated with our faction earlier today. They said they still wish to be a part of our faction. The corners of the noble's mouth twitched. They should all appear soon, and they will take our side. I'm sure they want to take control as well. Nobles lived for power in the end. They will pick our side if they want to live a long and peaceful life even after the war. I am certain of it. Of course, even if the Ainz household looks strong right now, they are just like a castle on top of the sand. Since they are a newly rising power, they have no stable foundation. Why would anyone choose to stick to such a side? The nobles discussed all sorts of things. At that moment, Marquis Ainz's gaze headed toward the nobles of his faction for the first time. He asked with a stoic expression, "Are you certain of it?" "Excuse me?" It was at that moment, screech. The doors to the hall opened. "Huh!" The noble who was looking at the Marquis turned toward the door before his eyes opened wide. Tap, tap, tap. The sounds of many people walking could be heard. These people walked in with serious expressions on their faces. They were all walking in while following behind a single person. That person was Ainz. They were following behind the current head of the Ainz household. Behind him were all of the Northeast region's nobles who were qualified to attend. Hey, that person? What the hell? Some of the Southeast region and Central factions' nobles looked toward them with shocked expressions. Didn't these people bow down to them this morning? Why would those people not look at them or any other factions? They were just walking with their gaze straight forward. And where were they headed? They were naturally headed for the open area beside the four factions. Ho! One of the nobles let out a gasp. He then realized something. There was now a faction in the Northeast region as well. The Ainz household was at the center of that faction. However, there was something they were mistaken about. Count Ainz did not create a faction. Ainz had no desire to be the leader of a faction. They had all gathered together because of one person's request. No, one person's command. They all just looked straight forward without saying anything. The nobles of the other factions started to whisper. However, a voice could be heard to put an end to those whispers. The knight at the entrance who had not said anything when the nobles were entering finally started to speak. His Highness, the Crown Prince Alberu Crossman, is now entering. The nobles flinched at this statement. One of the nobles next to Marquis Ainz couldn't help but speak. But Cal Ainz is not even here yet. It didn't make sense for a noble to enter later than the Crown Prince. It went against the proper etiquettes. Ha, they created a faction in the Northeast region and think they can do whatever? No. Marquinim, the noble who had been raising his voice, looked toward his leader, Marquis Sand Ainz. The Marquis started to speak with a stiff expression. That's not it. What did he mean? The moment that the noble had that question, the Marquis turned his head. His gaze headed toward the closed door, screech. The door slowly opened. All of the nobles stopped whispering to each other and stood up. However, they could not help but start to whisper once again. Crown Prince Albrew Crossman. He was wearing a fancy outfit that was fancier than ever before. He then asked the knight a question as he entered the door. "Why are you not introducing my close friend?" The knight stood at attention and shouted once again. "His Highness, Crown Prince Albrew Crossman and the Northeast Region's military commander, Cal Hennetus, are now entering." Tap, tap. The two of their footsteps echoed inside the hall. The smiling Albrew Crossman walked in with Cal Hennetus next to him. Cal, who was wearing black to symbolize the Rhone Kingdom's Northeast Region's navy, walked into the hall with a stoic expression. Cal and Crown Prince Albrew. The two of them were heading toward the same spot. This was telling the nobles of Cal's status. He was someone who could stand on par with the next king of the Rhone Kingdom. Cal Hennetus stood there beside the Crown Prince.